57 years after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech at the March on Washington, another historic event is taking place today in the district. Thank you for joining us for this ABC 7 special live coverage of the Commitment March.
Throughout the next several hours, we will bring everything taking place at the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool down on the National Mall to you at home. The main event is expected to begin at any minute. We're going to hear from several speakers, many speakers today, including the son of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Martin Luther King III. The march itself is scheduled to begin at 1 o'clock. And along with a team of our reporters out there in the field today, ABC 7's DC Bureau Chief Sam Ford is here too. Sam, so nice to be with you here.
Nice to be with you.
For such a big event today. And I know you've been out talking to people who are planning on attending the march. What have you heard from them?
Well, Allison, basically it seems to be about one thing, and it's the police issue. And of course, after the Jacob Blake situation in Kenosha, Wisconsin, it has certainly generated more interest in that. But as I talk to people, that was the issue for just about everybody I talked to, whether they were from California, from Texas, from Wisconsin, wherever they were from.
And a lot of people have traveled many days to get here for this because they drove. A lot of people aren't flying now because of the pandemic. Is there something they told you as far as a resolve or a hope that they have that they can at least achieve from this particular gathering?
Well, you know, I think, Jonathan, this march, the march, has had some kind of magical significance for a lot of black people since 1963 because so much changed. After that march, you had the Civil Rights Bill that passed. You also had the Voting Rights Bill that passed. So it did things.
Right.
And I think people are hoping that this magic of the march, if you will strike again.
Let's talk a little more about that history, Sam. You know, 57 years have passed. Some say not enough has changed. Some say we did make significant changes, as you said. What are you hearing from people who were there in 1963 about what they hope to see today?
Well, you know, one of the things that, again, it's the police issue. At that time in 1963, there was kind of a difference. In the South, you had the Civil Rights Movement, which was going on, a very significant thing going on. And in the North, you had black people that were sort of, let's say, you know, you couldn't get jobs. People were limited to jobs like elevator operator or common laborer, and people wanted to get beyond that. So you had kind of the union thing from the North, and you had the civil rights people from the South, and they came together for this march. And on both sides, a lot of things changed because black people are no longer sort of limited to certain jobs today as they were, let's say, 57 years ago.
And the backdrop then, the violence was only one-sided. All we saw were dogs that police had biting people that were just trying to walk down the sidewalk. And the brilliance of Martin Luther King at the time was saying, listen, keep it nonviolent. He understood the optics of what it would look like the other way around.
And one thing, Jonathan, that's really interesting, if you go back and you look, the origins of this march were not actually 1963, but during World War II in the 40s. There was a head of a union called the Sleeping Car Porters, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. His name was A. Philip Randolph. And at that time, black people were not being hired in the defense industry because of discrimination. And he told President Roosevelt he was going to have a march on Washington to protest this. And Roosevelt, in the midst of World War II, did not want to have to deal with a march. And he said he would issue an executive order outlawing discrimination in the defense industry. He did that. They called off the march. But 20 years later, Randolph decided to have this march on Washington. And if you look at the newspaper reporting before the march, all the quotes were of A. Philip Randolph in New York. After the march, because of that speech, everybody talked about Martin Luther King. And nobody knows who else was there.
Well, it was just it was such an amazing speech. And you were telling us something interesting about the speech, because I know he was at the Willard and he was working on some of the final touches of the speech the night before. But the I Have a Dream part of the speech, you're saying that was ad-libbed out there?
What it was, he had given an I Have a Dream speech in Detroit sometime before, and the great gospel singer, Mahalia Jackson, I don't know if you know about her, but she was there. And so she's listening to Martin Luther King's speech, and in the back, she stands up and says, "Martin, tell him about the dream." And at that point, he picked up on that, and he took it.
Yeah, because if you read the context of his speech, the whole front part, there's no I Have a Dream. It comes in the middle toward the end.
And she told him to say that.
And awesome. She was one of the few women at the time, and she sang, right?
She sang,
at the podium,
correct.
But she was one of the few women involved with that, which is going to be a very different scene today. And also, you know, you talk about the newspapers quoting different people back then, and the scene today is so visual, and a lot of people are saying that's why you're seeing people of all backgrounds and races involved in this movement now, is because of what we're seeing on people's cell phones with George Floyd, with Blake, and people, it resonates in a new way.
You wonder, Allison, was this stuff going on before, or did this just start with cell phone? I mean, some of the stuff we're seeing on cell phone video is so egregious, and you wonder, did it just not happen before, or did it happen and because it wasn't recorded, as far as anyone is concerned, it didn't happen?
And I wonder if there's anything that can be said, from the police departments, the national unions saying, this is what we're going to do. We're going to institute a policy that does X for training, or something like that would help, at least further this conversation, or at least help appease what's going on. Because some of these cases, you look at the video, even good law enforcement say, who taught him to do that? Or where'd she learn how to do that? That's not what we're taught to do. That's not where we're trained to do that.
Well, that's true. And so we talked to Ben Crump yesterday, and he sort of went through a litany of people. And you sort of forget it till you see the thing, but you've got the situation where from Trayvon Martin to the man who was sitting on his couch eating ice cream, and the Dallas policewoman walked in and thought he was in her house and shot him. So what I'm saying, there are just so many things that have come about. And, I guess at this point, to some people, it's come to a head. And this is as important today as civil rights were back, 57 years ago.
But the interesting thing is, here we're having this gathering in the midst of a pandemic. And, back then, I don't know that they knew how many people would show up at the reflecting pool for the, march back then. And some 300,000 people showed up. I mean, it was packed.
Yeah.
I don't know, are we seeing, you've heard more about the numbers of how many people are expected?
The numbers, I don't think are going to be anywhere near that. In fact, originally, the National Action Network of Al Sharpton, they're the ones that are hosting this. They had a request with the Park Service for 100,000 participants.
Right.
And they cut that to 50,000 participants. So the question is, how many will be there today? I'm sure there'll be a lot of people there today. Of course, with the mayor's order, she doesn't want people from states that are not basically on this list, where I guess where there's a COVID problem.
Quarantine issues, yeah.
That's a big issue. And so the National Action Network, NAN, has said that they will not allow buses from those areas to come here and be accommodated, because they're parking buses at RFK Stadium. Mm-hmm. So they say they're not going to accommodate those buses if they're not from basically states in the Northeast. I mean, the Northeast except Delaware.
Right.
Why they do? Why do we don't like?
Right.
Are we expecting somebody from Delaware? Is that why they did that at the last minute?
No, but this list comes out. I don't know exactly what the origin of it or how it works out, but in any event, Delaware wasn't on it, and we've heard from Delaware that they don't appreciate it.
Being added last minute. Well, there's definitely, a big line was forming this morning because they're taking everybody's temperature before they can go in. So people couldn't just stream in easily. They had to wait in a big long line to get their temperature checked. They have to wear a face mask. They have to socially distance. There's going to be lots of hand sanitizer all along the route, and our reporters who are out there today can talk to us a little bit more about how many people they're seeing, what the crowd size is. But yeah, I think 50,000 is the last number the organizers said was their estimate.
Yeah, and they've also if you look there, there'll be fences where they sort of fenced it off, hoping to be able to sort of control people for social distancing purposes. Only let so many people inside a particular area. That is the hope.
Paint the differences between the backdrops of what we saw back in the 1960s as opposed to what we're seeing today, is what's playing out socially.
Well, one thing, I don't think there's the fear today. If you talk to people, particularly who were talking about the 1960s, some of those people had just come from places like Birmingham, where Bull Connor, the police commissioner, had sick police dogs and fire hoses on these people. They had come from war, basically being beaten up, to come up here for some inspiration and to go back down there to get beaten up some more. I mean, so that's a whole different thing. That is not what's going on. It's not any clear and present danger. But the concern now is that at any moment, the idea is that at any moment, some situation could arise in which, you find yourself at the target of some situation that you don't think is fair.
Right. Well, let's listen in. The speakers have been going all morning. Oh, actually, the person we were going to listen into just wrapped up, so we're going to have a little break here before the next person. As far as the speakers, Sam, is there anybody in particular that's the keynote or someone that people are really coming here to get inspiration from?
Well, I don't know that people know all the folks that are here. It hasn't been publicized. We know that Martin Luther King III is going to be speaking. That is the son of Martin Luther King, who, you know, it was a wonderful video recently released by the Anacostia Museum, and you see Martin Luther King III is like a 9-year-old boy here with his dad in a parade in D.C. He's speaking, and of course, Al Sharpton is probably the main speech there. And I'll tell you one thing. I looked at the list and they said so-and-so gets to speak for 2 minutes and he gets to speak for 2 minutes. Al Sharpton gets 15 minutes. Forget it. I'm telling you, if this is the plan that they're going to go from 1 to 3 and all these people are going to be speaking, forget it. No. This is going to go past this set time, absolutely.
Yeah. Good point.
I don't think they have anybody up there who's the speaker police who's going to say, okay, your time is up, you got to go. I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. So I'm thinking 4.
Well, speaking of the speakers, why don't we listen in? Somebody has stepped up to the microphones. Let's listen in.
Of the local asked King to stay on, and King was successful in being elected president in 2009, re-elected in 2012, 2015, and 2018. King has served on the UPS Supplement Negotiation Committee for Philadelphia metro area and the National Master Freight Supplement Panel. Please welcome Marcus W. King.
Good morning. Thank you, Reverend Al Sharpton, Martin Luther King Jr. III, and the National Action Network for assembling us here today. This is an awesome, event. Brothers and sisters, good morning. It's an honor to be with you. As the young lady just said, my name is Marcus King. I'm the director for the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Human Rights and Diversity Commission. And I bring you greetings on behalf of our General President, James P. Hoffa. The Teamsters Union have a long history of standing not only for members, but for those Americans who have been discriminated over and overlooked. For 57 years after the first March on Washington, the Teamsters have again stand with you proud to reaffirm our support for racial and economic equality in this country. The Teamsters brothers and sisters, black, white, men, women, all stood with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to fight for justice. And now we must finish the fight. We must finish this fight. We must complete the mission for genuine equality. There are forces out there working against us to dismantle the union and labor laws. They have circumvented civil rights laws in our courts. They have manipulated our elections to try to block our vote. They have denied us job promotion because of the color of our skin. They have stolen wages from us by perpetuating minimum wage standards that no one can survive on. Yes, they even are going after labor unions. They have tried to systematically strip away the voice to protect workers as we fight for fair wages, equal pay, good health care, and a decent pension for retirement. And now they're trying to separate American labor by putting a gap between the have and the have-nots. As it gets wider and wider, just look at Jeff Bezos, what he made this year. Brothers and sisters, it's time for action. Words are not enough. We will not be ignored any longer. We can change it now. So there's 3 things that I'm going to ask you to do. 1, lobby members of Congress to pass H.R. 71, the Justice and Policing Act, George Floyd Act. 2, lobby H.R. 4, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act. But most important, number 3, we must vote. This coming November, we must vote. We have to tell this country, take the knee off our necks. Use your voice for those who can no longer be with us. Make your voice count. Jacob Blaine, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery. Do it for my brother Teamster, Philando Castile, who was killed by Minnesota police. Or do it for you. Make your voice count. Make it a better place for us and our children. Black lives do matter because our lives matter. Stay safe. God bless you. All of my brothers and sisters in the movement, Teamster Strong. My name is Marcus King, and I'm the Director for Human Rights and Diversity for the Teamsters International Union. Thank you.
Live pictures right now from right in front of the Lincoln Memorial, all along the reflecting pool. You can see the crowd is somewhat less than what we saw, back in the 1960s. But that was basically by design because of the pandemic. But a lot of folks have come here from all points around the country to be a part of today's and to listen to some of the speakers. And in fact, we're going to keep dipping in as we go along to hear what folks have to say. And
you can see how they have it set up there for the speakers to be 6 feet apart. They have chairs set up for everyone to have their space. Now, we have our crews down there, and we want to check in with our Justin Hinton. He is at the south side of the reflecting pool. Justin, we're curious, how would you describe the crowd size?
Well, go ahead and take a look. There are a lot of folks who are out here right now. You mentioned those social distancing signs, but with this many people, it's just nearly impossible. And more people are continuing to come to fill this particular section. Maybe an hour ago, there weren't nearly quite this many people, but more and more keep coming into this section. It's interesting. I was looking at from 1963 and seeing a lot of those folks who have their feet in the water, but just not the case here. I'll send it back to you.
Thanks very much. We're having some problems with your microphone. We'll see if we can get that fixed up. Technology being what it is, with so many people out there, it's having a problem. So let's go back out and listen to the speakers as they step up to the microphone.
After all, the gay rights movement was formed because of brutality of the police in a bar known as Stonewall. Until the black community is recognized as an equal community, until the police harassment, the police belittlement, the police shootings, and the police killings, we will stand united. We are all one. We want you to know that we will continue demonstrating. We will continue marching. We will continue to protest. We will continue to upset the power structure. We will continue to risk arrest. We will continue to be arrested. We will be part of this movement, and in all the demonstrations and protests in New York and across the country, you can see our rainbow flags and our rainbow banners. Black Lives Matter is one of the most important organizations and movement, one of the most important movements in this country and in history. I thank you all. I thank Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network for putting this together and being such a good friend to the LGBT community. Together to victory, and vote out the racist in the White House and vote out his entire administration and his supporters. Thank you.
And there you have it. We're listening in as people come up to the microphone and speak. We have a very long list of speakers. I'm not exactly sure where they are on the list right now because what I have right now for
It's not matching up.
11:15 is not that person.
So I think a lot of audibles.
Yeah,
There's a lot of audibles being called because we do have a list of speakers, and a lot of the folks that we see getting up the mic, we have no idea who they are. A lot of times they'll be introduced like we see here. We'll do our best to keep dipping in so that we can understand who's being introduced and who's speaking. But some of them, we do have their names. If we share those with you, it's because we know that that's who it is.
Well, we talked about the differences between 1963 and now, and Sam, we were talking about the cell phones and the idea that everything is documented instantaneously.
Right.
And I interviewed Virginia Ali, who, as you know, is the owner of Ben's Chili Bowl, which has been here forever. It's an institution in DC. And Dr. Martin Luther King had a satellite office right by Ben's, and he would come there all the time, and they became friends. And she was telling me she was in the crowd during the I Have a Dream speech. And she said, I remember thinking, I wish I could record this.
Right.
But there was nothing to record it with back then. And she said, little did I know in that moment that it would become one of the most famous speeches in history. And then she said after the speech, Dr. King came to Ben's Chili Bowl. I don't know if it was the same day or the next day. And she said he was overjoyed with how everything went, that it exceeded his expectations.
You know, the next year he won the Nobel Peace Prize, 1964. But talking to Virginia, you know, right there on the corner of 14th and U, which is where the Reeve Center is now, that was Martin Luther King's DC headquarters. And his head guy was Walter Fauntroy, who was a former congressman here in Washington. And that is the spot at which the riot started when he was killed in 1968. But that's right down from Ben's Chili Bowl. Yeah. Virginia said that he was a customer when he was in D.C.
Well, he had good taste. All right, we got another speaker at the mic. Let's listen in.
My grandsons ain't gonna be marching for the same stuff my granddaddy marched for. This the revolution, all right? We just marched 750 miles from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 24 days to get here because we not gonna stop until we get changed. That's what we need in this country. All of y'all that came today, I know y'all been marching in y'all cities. I know y'all been marching. Don't stop marching. We gonna organize because they don't expect that. We gonna come together because they don't expect that. We gonna demand change because they don't expect that. We not gonna have our kids marching. This is it. We've been marching for the same stuff for 60 years. Black people shouldn't be marching for the same stuff Martin Luther King was marching for. I'm tired. I'm tired. And I'm tired of asking for justice. I just want it to stop. We don't want justice. That's after a racist police do something to us. We need them out of the police. We need all these racist people gone. We need change, and we can get that by voting. Now, while we marched in 750 miles, everybody that came and chastised us, everybody that came with shotguns, everybody that came messing with us had Trump signs. Trump 2020. That's the new way that they exhibit racism in this country and hide behind it. So we gotta vote Trump out of office, all right? So when it's time to vote, we gonna vote. And if y'all see me up here, if you an activist, stop me out there so we can organize. It's time. This is the revolution. This is the revolution.
Get it?
All right, a little break in between speakers here. I saw on some of our paperwork that D Nice was doing the music, the DJ, who has gotten quite a following and a name for himself during the pandemic because he would do these live DJ parties at night. And thousands and thousands of people were tuning in on Instagram because they couldn't go to a club, couldn't go to a bar. And he's just, you know, got this reputation as the nicest guy in the business, and now here he is in Washington taking part, helping out with some of the music.
Big day, too. Let's listen in. I think they're going to introduce another speaker here.
And the University of Albany State University of New York, and sits on the board of the National Urban League. Please welcome David G. Clooney.
I'm David Clooney. I lead the Black Economic Alliance, a group of black business leaders and allies dedicated to improving work, wages, and wealth for black people. We know The 1963 March on Washington was a march for jobs and freedom. In over 50 years, the wealth gap between black and white Americans has not changed significantly. In fact, by some measures, it's even wider today. But we're at an inflection point. It may have taken 400 years plus 8 minutes and 46 seconds to get here, but there is an increasing recognition that systemic racism continues to oppress black people in every part of American life. So what do we do with this moment? Of course, we need to continue to fight for social justice, but we also need to fight for economic justice from our elected leaders and in the business community. We need to fight for better work, wages, and wealth for black people. That's skills training for the future of work, closing the black-white pay gap, and building generational wealth for black families. Right now, we absolutely have to vote. Congress should pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to ensure free and fair elections, and just like we're showing up to march across America, we have to show up and vote. Over 40 states will allow early voting this year, so vote early if you can. Make a plan and make sure your vote is counted well before Election Day. We owe it to the civil rights giants who marched, bled, and died for us. We owe it to the families of countless black people lost to unchecked institutional racism. We owe it to America to help her keep her promise to all of us. I am so inspired by the demand for justice that's emanating from every corner of America right now. We have to continue this march on every platform we have, in the streets, in the halls of Congress, in the corporate boardrooms, and with our vote, so we can finally achieve social and economic justice. Thank you.
I was just asking Sam whether you wish you were down there today, because you've been covering this so much for us and have such a deep investment in the DC community. Do you wish you were down there with everybody, or today's going to be a hot one? Maybe it's a good one to cover here.
I just as soon be here with y'all today.
Well, you've been down there all week working.
Well, I was thinking about these marches, and I've been in Washington a long time. And they had the 20th anniversary march. I covered that. They had the 25th anniversary march. I covered that. The 30th, the 40th, the 50th. I've covered them all. So I'm happy to sit out the 57th.
Well,
you're pacing yourself for the 60th.
This is going to be a hot day. They need to make sure, people who are going down there need to make sure they have water with them, lots of extra, things to keep themselves cool, because when you're out there for hours and hours, as you know, it can be tough.
Yeah, especially in the sun. There's not, unless you're on the side of the reflecting pool where the trees are and get some shade. Otherwise, if you're standing on the sidewalk, not only is it hot, but there is no protection from the sun there.
That's true. And, it was interesting. I remember these kind of paper hats in the 63 March that they all sort of folded and put on their heads, these white hats, and I guess just to keep cool. But that was a hot day as well.
All right, we got another speaker stepping up. Let's listen in.
I'm Portia Taylor, and I'm here as a representative of Black Girls Ride. More than a magazine, we are a movement of women passionate about motorsports. Over 100 women rode across America to be with you here today. We are our ancestors' wildest dreams. Women of color on ground, traveling across the land of the free. We are your mothers, your grandmothers, your aunts, your sisters, and your daughters. Our ride started Monday in Long Beach, California. As we rode through Texas, I thought about my soror, Sandra Bland, and how a simple traffic stop ended in her death. We all witnessed George Floyd's death as he cried for help, the heartbreaking death of Breonna Taylor as she slept in her home. And less than a week ago, Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back and paralyzed. With each act of senseless violence, we feel a stirring in our collective soul. When a call to march was issued, we knew it was time to mount up. We packed up our bikes and rode thousands of miles in protest against police brutality. We ride unapologetically for Black lives, and we raise our throttle hand in support of those on the front line of our struggle. We ride to ensure the freedom of our future leaders. We've come a long way, but our journey is not over. In November, Black Girls Ride will rev our engines. We will lead the ride to the polls and fuel the ballot boxes of this nation to choose a leader that will provide the unity our country desperately needs. We invite you to join in this and vote like your life depends on it. Thank you.
right, now we want to get back out into the crowds. Our Heather Graff is standing by with the latest. Heather, you're at the north side there of the reflecting pool, right?
Hi, Allison. Yes, we're on the north side of the reflecting pool. You can see, of course, the Lincoln Memorial here behind me, and we want to just kind of give you a sense of what we're seeing so far here today. The first thing I want to talk about is the coronavirus precautions that we've seen. So you see I'm wearing this green bracelet, and that indicates that you've had a temperature check before being allowed into this area. And
are closest to the power, driving and informing policymaking. Prior to her being elected to Congress, she served on the Boston City Council for 8 years and was the first woman of color elected to the council in its 100-year history. Please welcome Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley.
Good morning, beloved. Today, I am thinking of the ancestors, not just the ones recorded in our history books, but the ones omitted from those pages. The justice seekers, the freedom riders, the organizers, the community builders, every loved one that packed a brown bag lunch, led a freedom song, risked their life and livelihood, that Vaseline and elbow and sent up a prayer. Their sacrifice and self-determination shaped history and brought us to this moment. The truth of the matter is, we are because of them. We are Black with a capital B. We are the manifestation of the movement. We are a symbol of social, political, and cultural progress. If my granddaddy, the Reverend E. James Eccles, were here, he would whisper in my ear and say, "Grandbaby, make it plain." And I intend to do just that, make it plain. We are in unprecedented, uncertain times. We are challenged by the state of the nation and the crisis we face, but the state of our movements, it is strong. And another world is possible. Yes, it is possible to legislate justice and accountability. People over profits, joy over trauma, freedom over fear. Yes, it is possible to write budgets that actually value Black lives. If it feels unfamiliar, that's because it has never been done in America. We will meet the moment. We will work towards healing, justice, and collective liberation like our lives depend on it, because they do. We will march on, clear in our conviction, rooted in our faith, grounded in our history, intentional as we build. Let me make it plain. Black lives matter.
Just so you know, when we're watching this, we want to hear every speaker, but what's happening with the social distancing is the person who's doing the introductions is probably about 25 feet away. So after the speaker's done, they walk away, then the person who does the introductions comes over, they walk away, and then the speaker comes up.
I wanted to mention, Sam was pointing out the timeline because the official program was slated to start at 11 o'clock, but from the list of speakers we have, they haven't gotten to any of the people in the official program yet. So we're probably a good hour or so behind.
That's what it looked like as I was looking at the people they had listed there.
But we're here all afternoon, so we got nowhere to be. So we're good. We're going to let this play out. And
air conditioning.
Yeah.
I know. I did want to mention one other thing before we go back, because you said air conditioning and we were talking about the heat out there. Mayor Bowser actually just retweeted something from D.C. Homeland Security saying that a heat emergency has been issued for the District of Columbia because the heat index is expected to be 97 degrees today.
Right.
So they have cooling centers open.
And that's the temperature. But if you're standing down there on concrete and what that does with the heat and the sun, it's going to be hotter than that. I mean, the heat index is going to be up over 100. All right, let's listen in and see who's next on the speaking.
Chelsea, please welcome U.S. Representative Adriano Espiat.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Reverend Al Sharpton. Thank you, National Action Network. Thank you all for being here on this great morning. I bring you greetings from Harlem, the capital of the African diaspora in the world. From East Harlem, the launching pad of the Latino experience in New York State. From immigrant Washington Heights, Hamilton Heights, Inwood, and working class Northwest Bronx. Over 50 years ago, the great Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis stood here and shared their dreams with all of you. Today, as the first formally undocumented member of Congress, I stand here with you today to say that yes, I am a man. That yes, we shall overcome. That yes, sí se puede. That yes, Black Lives Matter. And that yes, without no justice, there will be no peace. We come here today burying the scars and the wounds of 400 years of struggle to say that whether your ancestors picked cotton or whether they cut sugarcane, we're all in the same boat right now. We must pass legislation to ensure that there is police reform. We must pass the pieces of legislation highlighted in the Harlem Manifesto against police brutality that are all included in the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. Let's get rid of the chokehold. Let's get rid of the knee. We also must pass the John Lewis Voters' Rights Advancement Act to ensure that we all be able to vote. We must enact criminal justice reform. Let's do away with the death penalty. Let's do away with solitary confinement. Let's do away with mandatory minimums. I am a man. We shall overcome. Sí se puede. No justice, no peace, and Black Lives Matter. God bless you and keep the faith.
All right, we have now officially gotten to our program section here that was set to begin at 11 o'clock. That was Representative Edrano Espilat from New York, a Democratic congressman. And so we begin the official program here for the Commitment March.
The introductions are beginning for the next speaker. Let's listen in.
Charles Booker, a 36-year-old state legislator born in Louisville, Kentucky. He successfully ran for State House in Kentucky in 2018, becoming the youngest African American in the House in more than 90 years, where he fought for common sense gun safety reform, prescription drug cost relief, voter protection and restoration in support of labor unions, for economic justice, against racial injustice, and more. Representative Booker recently founded Hood to the Holler, a 501c4 to capture the energy and infrastructure he built in his run to continue to build power, work on voter registration, and more, and to help positively transform our future. Please welcome Representative Charles Booker.
We stand here in the legacy of the dream that Dr. King lifted up, that Whitney Young pushed for, that Mattie Jones fought for, that my granddad Lindsey E. Hearn Sr. demanded. We're here today because we know that dream is not done. Because although they marched for us then, the cries we're hearing across the country right now, from Kenosha to Kentucky, from the hood where I'm from, to the hollers in Appalachia, to everywhere in between, those cries let us know we have more marching to do. And it is in this moment where we must rise up together. Because listen, we are built for this moment. We are on the shoulders of giants, but we must step off of those shoulders and lead ourselves. We are the dream, but we must turn that dream into demands. Demands for real justice, demands for humanity, demands for accountability, demands for an end to poverty, demands for an end to racism. And I am a living witness. As the youngest black state legislator in Kentucky since the first one, and yes, I did stand up to run against Mitch McConnell, I am a personal witness that we are ready for this moment. We're built for the work we must do. And if we come together, all of us, if we stand united, if we march together, if we bend that arc together, there is nothing we can't do. There is no mountain we can't move. And there is no root of racism we cannot pull up. So we got to do it right now. We got to do it yesterday, so we definitely got to do it now. And I stand here as a young man in the legacy of a giant, Congressman John Lewis, who said 57 years ago some words that still ring true right now. We have to lift our voices together and say to America, wake up. Wake up, America. Because we can't stop, we cannot quit, and we cannot be patient. Let's win together. Let's fight together. Let's transform our future. Brianna, I'm representing you right now. Thank you all.
That was Charles Booker speaking. And again, we do have an order of the folks that are supposed to be giving speeches. The organizers put that together, but they're not in order right now. A lot of names have come up that we haven't even seen on the list, and then a couple we have. So we'll do the best we can to try and let you know. Oftentimes we'll get back, like right now they're introducing, so we'll just listen in as they introduce the next speaker.
In college engagement and is a policy advisor for the National Action Network. A recent graduate of North Carolina A&T State University, Tyleek is a proud member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, the Eta chapter, and hopes to one day serve as a legislator on the Hill. Please welcome Tyleek McMillan.
I give honor to the conveners, my boss and mentor, Reverend Al Sharpton, and Martin Luther King III. I also want to recognize the young leaders standing behind me from Nan Youth Huddle and Nan Collegiate. We find ourselves here in the spirit of John Lewis, making good trouble, necessary trouble, because the soul of our democracy is depending on it. We're not here to ask for justice. We're not here to negotiate justice, but we are here to demand justice. Far too many times we have been cut out. Far too many times we have been budgeted out, counted out, resourced out. It's time for legislators to invest in education. It's time for legislators to invest in mental health services. It's time to invest in communities. And I love my 1891. It's time to invest in historically black colleges and universities. Because we don't deserve just a half a dollar. We don't just deserve the quarter of the dollar, but we deserve the whole dollar. Dr. King spoke about the check that bounced in the bank of justice. And we've come to let the teller know at the bank that this check better not bounce. Because we will march and we will fight, because that's what we deserve. In the words of Dr. King in closing, and again, we come to cash the check, a check that is willing to demand the riches of freedom and security of justice. Thank you. No justice. No peace.
Tyleek McMillan representing a large group of young people there. And Sam, we were talking a few minutes ago. We've interviewed Tyleek several times. He was on Good Morning Washington as well. He's one of the young organizers of this event today. And he remarked about his age, being 23.
Yeah, he said he remarked that John Lewis was the youngest speaker at the March on Washington, 23 years old. And also he was noting that he's 23 years old. And, you know, I could be wrong, but I think John Lewis was probably the last living speaker of those speakers at the March on Washington. I'm just not aware of anybody else who spoke who's still with us. But yeah, he was the head of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And our Congresswoman here in D.C., Eleanor Holmes Norton, was also a member of that committee, as was Frank Smith, who was a former council member here in D.C. He is head of the African American Civil War Museum. He was part of that group, and they were a lot of young people. In some cases, they lived in the South. In some cases, they went to the South to work like Norton did. And they made a difference with the sit-ins and such things as they did back then.
We're watching this new generation now.
Sure.
All right, let's listen back into the speakers.
Hello, hola. My name is Janet Murguia, and I'm president and CEO of Unidos US, the largest Latino civil rights and advocacy organization in the country. I want to tell you why I am here. I am here because we have stood and always will stand with Reverend Sharpton and Martin Luther King III and our brothers and sisters in the Black community until systemic and institutional racism in our society is eradicated. I am here because 25% of my community is Afro-Latino. So we don't just empathize, we identify with the Black community. I am here because we need law enforcement to get their knees off the necks of our Black and Latinx young men. I am here because what we have seen in Kenosha, Wisconsin this week, a man shot in the back and paralyzed, peaceful protesters shot and killed by white nationalist vigilantes as the police have turned a blind eye, and silence from the man who holds the highest office in the land. That is immoral and unacceptable. I am here because our communities are bearing the brunt of a pandemic, both in lives and livelihoods, that is only getting worse yet. I am here because we have in common, what we have in common is far greater than what divides us. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote to Cesar Chavez in 1966, our separate struggles are really one, a struggle for freedom, for dignity, and humanity. I am here because we must support the young people of every background here as they rise up, make their voices heard, and tell those of their generation about the America that they want to see. Because we must reject bigotry and hate and insist that our country live up to its ideals and the values that we share. I am here because I am standing on the shoulders of giants like Congressman John Lewis to say, your fight is my fight. Tu lucha es mi lucha. I am here because Black lives matter. Sí se puede. Adelante. Muchísimas gracias.
All right, let's get out to Tom Rousey, who's out by the reflecting pool as well for us this afternoon. Tom?
Hey, Jonathan, just a few moments ago, we got a chance to talk with Martin Luther King III. Of course, he's one of the featured speakers today, and he's scheduled to speak very shortly. But while we in the media were asking him questions, he was asked what his father, who gave the I Have a Dream speech 57 years ago today, would think about what's going on today.
You know, none of us really can answer that. I would imagine, however, that he would be proud of people gathering about injustice but sad that people had to gather because justice should already exist.
So again, that's Martin Luther King III. His father, 57 years ago today, made history from the very spot where Martin Luther King III will be speaking very shortly. Reporting live from just a little north of the Lincoln Memorial, I'm Tom Rousey. Back to you, Jonathan.
Thanks very much. And here we got more speakers being introduced. Let's listen in.
Good afternoon. Let's give ourselves a celebration. Look at how we've turned out in the midst of the pandemic, in the midst of all that's going on. This is important to us. We lay ourselves on the line because this is important. On behalf of the members of the board of National Action Network, I want to thank all of the various organizations who have collaborated with us to bring this to pass. We celebrate the great leadership of our President, Reverend Al Sharpton, and Martin Luther King III, having convened us together. But our coming together for the speeches and the rhetoric of the moment will be meaningless if we do not leave here and activate and get involved and fight the fight and vote and encourage those who are not. We are at a crossroads in American history. We're at the intersection of perish or promise. If we fail to deliver in November, we will perish. If we fail to bring out our votes, we will not enjoy what we have struggled from. We're at a moment when all that we have fought for, all that our forefathers and mothers have died for, is at risk of being lost. Blood that's been shed for our freedoms is on the line, and we cannot perish. We must stand up. We must fight. We must engage every resource that we have. We still believe in America's promise. Not only are we on the precipice of perishing, but we're on the precipice of realizing the promise. And the promise is a nation where every person, black or white, yellow, red, male, female, LBGT, every dimension of our humanity is in the promise of a great America. And so I challenge us all to believe in a better day, to make the sacrifices, to make sure we go back to our cities and knock on doors and call our friends, because this will be a sham if we fail to bring out the vote on November the 3rd. This will be mockery if we do not deliver ourselves to the polls. This will be a disgrace if we fail to engage our resources to deliver on our own behalf. And our forefathers and mothers who lay in the cemeteries will want to turn over in their graves if we fail to deliver in this moment and grasp what they fought for. God bless you. Let's go. Let's get this done. We're able. We're powerful. Use the UR code that's on the screen that talks about the black church, 75, vote 75. All of us must be engaged. God bless you, and I look to see you in the near future at the victory celebration. God bless you.
That is the senior pastor of Grace Baptist Church, Dr. Franklin Richardson. He's been in the D.C. area a long time. Hold on, I think they're going to introduce somebody right away. Here, let's see.
Some of these speakers are sticking to the time. You know, we mentioned a lot of them were allotted 2 minutes, and some of them are doing that, so.
Well, but even that, they're going to be an hour late.
Yeah, that's true.
If they stick to the 2 minutes.
Exactly. Let's listen in again.
Of the Arab American Institute, please welcome Maya Berry.
You guys look amazing. Reverend Al Sharpton, Martin Luther King III, thank you for your leadership. To the National Action Network, thank you for convening us today. To the families who've lost loved ones to racist violence, I am so sorry for the pain you have been forced to endure. I'm humbled to stand and march alongside you today and every day. My name is Maya Berry, and I'm the Executive Director of the Arab American Institute. On behalf of 3.7 million Arab Americans across the country, I stand here today with you in defense of Black lives. We do so because it is right and regrettably because it is necessary to declare that Black lives matter. We do so because we understand that until the killing of Black men, women, and children stops, until systematic racism and anti-Blackness is addressed, the America we all desire cannot be realized. For each life taken, each family destroyed, each neighborhood brutally patrolled, and for each protester taking to the streets to demand that all this stop, targeted by the same system of policing, justice will not be served by reforming tactics or trainings. Here's a simple truth. It's been 168 days since Breonna Taylor was killed in her own home. No charges have been filed. The system is not broken. It is working as it was designed, and we must change it. Today, we must recommit to defend Black lives, to end police brutality, and the racist system that upholds it. We must recommit to fight voter suppression and the impact of a politicized decennial census like we have never seen. Just as the 1963 march and the mass demonstrations in communities across the country shepherded the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, we must not stop until we have secured the passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Khalid Jabara and Heather Heyer No Hate Act, and the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Just as matter is the minimum, these important legislative priorities must be where we start. Thank you.
That shot there of the crowd looks quite big. Looks like the crowd is pretty big, but when you look at some of the more aerial shots, it's hard to get a sense of exactly how many people are down there.
Right.
The march itself is scheduled to begin around 1 o'clock. As we said, it probably will start a little bit later, but it'll be interesting to see with the pandemic how many people show up here in Washington today.
All right, let's listen in.
Jamal Harrison Bryant combines sound biblical teaching, business acumen, and political insight to propel the body of Christ to action and greater levels of faith. His ability to reach across social, economic, and political barriers has helped people not only experience the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ, but to activate success in their everyday lives. His ministry has become an incubator for entrepreneurs, homeowners, and like Dr. Bryant, is a senior pastor of New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Lithonia, Georgia. Please welcome Dr. Jamal Bryant.
To our convener, organizer, and visionary, the man who God has anointed for this hour, Reverend Al Sharpton, we thank him for his courage and for his faith and for his distinction, as well as his commitment to civil rights down through the years. Brothers and sisters, not since 44 BC, when Marcus Aurelius Junius Brutus led 59 accomplices to stand.
And good afternoon, everyone. We're coming up on the noon hour on this Friday. This is our coverage of the Commitment March. I'm Allison Starling.
And I'm Jonathan Elias. Good to have you along this afternoon. What we've been doing is listening to the speeches that are going on right in front of the Lincoln Memorial for this march. In fact, let's get right back out and listen in.
King said that we as a people should not find ourselves caught in the paralysis of analysis. In other words, our coming together is in vain if we just talk about the problems, but don't chart a course towards the solution. It's Harriet Tubman, who said, I freed thousands of slaves, but I would have freed hundreds more had they known they were slaves. I only thought about that when I saw the slaves on TV this week endorsing Donald Trump. I said, if only they knew they were slaves, they could have been rendered free. We cannot remain paralyzed. We can't be paralyzed wondering whether or not we're going to support the very first black female vice president in the United States. Don't tell me about what it is that she did in the past and you not talk about what she wants to do in America in the future. She wants to make sure that we get rid of privatized prisons, that there are no more mandatory minimums, and marijuana is no longer an illegal substance. We cannot be paralyzed knowing that she graduated just a few miles from here, from the original HU. And those of us who are products of HBCUs, you ought to be making some noise right now, knowing what it can develop and what it can deliver. We cannot be paralyzed. We cannot allow white evangelicals to paralyze us, saying that they cannot support our agenda because they're for pro-life. Don't tell me you're for pro-life and white evangelicals are silent when black people are dying in the street like dogs. We cannot be paralyzed. The black church, you cannot be paralyzed, saying that you're not going to support Black Lives Matter because of 3 fearless black sisters who happen to be lesbian. We've got to love our LGBTQ community, realizing that those are our sons and those are our daughters. We cannot be paralyzed. We cannot be paralyzed into believing Mr. Jones' water is colder. This is the time where we've got to support black businesses because too many of them are closing down because of COVID-19. Not because they don't have adequate service, but because they don't have adequate support. But what America has to know about the tenacity of black people is that even when you render us paralyzed, we still know how to crawl. And on November 3rd, no matter what you do, we gonna crawl to the polls. If you take away the mailbox, we still gonna crawl. You take away the polling stations away from our community, we still gonna crawl. We gonna sing the original gangster rap music. Before I be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave and go on to my Lord and be free. We still gonna crawl. There is something about us that understands that we stand today with our brother Jacob, realizing that even if we find ourselves paralyzed and you force us to crawl, we are like butterflies because butterflies only have 2 options. They crawl and then they fly. And we understand in this hour, this is the hour for black people to fly. Maya Angelou said, you can write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. But still like dust, we rise, we rise, we rise. And if you don't know Maya Angelou, the least you can do is loan the Migos. And black people from here until November 3rd, we gotta walk it like we talk it. We gotta keep moving until our generation takes the baton, changes the country, and makes America great for the very first time. Black people, rise up and accomplish what you will.
All right, as we pause in between speakers here, we want to go back out to our field crews, our Heather Graff at the north side of the reflecting pool. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Allison. I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you, but hopefully you can hear me. So we have moved a bit further back from the Lincoln Memorial, and the reason we did that is because we wanted to connect with an associate professor at George Washington University who we have spoken with several times in the weeks leading up to our coverage to the Commitment March. So I want to bring in Dr. Imani Cheers. Thank you so much for making some time for us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And tell us who you're here with today.
Oh, I'm so grateful. I'm here with my son Isaiah. I'm here with my dear friend Nikki Steele and my other dear friend Joy and her son Chase.
And you've been able to provide great insight for us over the last few weeks as we talked about the significance of this march. There's so many comparisons made between this commitment march and the 1963 March on Washington. Put that into perspective for us.
It's really critical, and I want to bring up the point that on August 28th, 1955, 14-year-old Emmett Till was lynched in Mississippi, and that is truly what spurred and sparked our modern-day civil rights movement, and the reason why that subsequently, 7, 8 years later, that we actually had the March on Washington. So it's really important to mention that. I wanted my son here for that reason. I wanted Chase here for that reason. Chase is 12, Isaiah 6, and it was just really, really important to me that they are here to witness it. It's really sad to say that the idea for this march came after the murder of George Floyd, and then we've even seen earlier this week the fact that Jacob Blake was shot in the back, 7 times, and it's just really infuriating that we're still having these same conversations, these same, violence against police, and we're just here to share with our children and to speak out about the injustices in our country.
And we know there are a lot of differences between the 1963 march and a lot of similarities. Let's talk about some of the differences, and that is the role of women and the women we might hear from today. Explain that for me.
It's so incredible to mention that the original March on Washington, there was only one woman that spoke, and that was Daisy Bates. And that was because Myrlie Evers was actually stuck in traffic on her way here from the airport. And now we have women who are front and center. We've heard many of them today. We're going to hear more of them. Family members from those who have been killed: George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Jacob Blake. And it's like so many people. And women are on the forefront. And we're here. We're loud. They've always been there, but now they're on the forefront. And it's just really, really inspiring for myself, for my friends, and my family as well.
Well, I know we need to let you guys get in there so you can listen to some of these speakers.
Thank you.
And for right now, I'm going to toss it back to the stage where we have someone else at the podium.
Put a knee on his neck and say, "I can't breathe." And then we know that we have to change this nation when we have Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, and Michael Brown, and many others. And so today we come to acknowledge that we ask America not to fear us. We ask you not to send tweets that we are attacking you as a mob, because the militia walks around freely and shoots us without anyone's concern. And so we are standing here today to say why we can't wait. We want an America that will stomp out the divisiveness, the intimidation, and the threat. We want a White House who stands as a healer in chief, who understands black mothers' pain and understands your pain. And then, of course, we want to make sure that as we do this, we know that H.R. 40 is intertwined with the bill I helped write, which is the bill of George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. And so here we are today asking the question, how did this happen? Because of institutional racism. And I'm here to tell you that we must have the commission to study and develop, as my brothers and sisters have said, reparation proposals. We must answer the call of institutional racism. We have got to make sure that the social, economic, psychological, scientific, and educational government-sanctioned institutional racism stops right now. And as I told a 12-year-old, as I walked and told Martin Luther King's third daughter, that now today, this attack on us as people of color who died on the battles of warfare, who have died on the streets for civil rights, it will stop today. Thank you, Reverend Sharpton and the National Action Network, for understanding the importance of the Congress with over 150 co-sponsors in the House, passing H.R. 40. We will heal the nation, but we will not stop until the nation knows Black Lives Matter and reparations are passed as the most significant civil rights legislation of the 21st century. Now is the time. Why we can't wait.
Representative Sheila Jackson Lee speaking there today, and we're remarking how the music is trying to keep the flow going of the speakers today.
Actually, what do? They start playing it when your time is up.
Right.
But we also point out, Sam and I are pointing out that, you know, if you've spent any time in a church,
in a Baptist church,
and I've been to a couple Baptist churches, when they start playing the guitar, that means you're just getting revved up. I mean,
getting started.
You're only in first gear, getting ready to shift into second. I mean, so they're not going to. That's not their cue to get off stage.
So if we're going by our list here, after Sheila Jackson Lee, we're supposed to hear from Tom Perez, who's the chairman of the DNC. Also, Yolanda Renee King, the granddaughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., is scheduled to speak here in just a few minutes as well. We're not completely on schedule, but they're doing a really good job of introducing whoever is coming up next.
In fact, I think if we have a shot of the podium, you'll see that the person who does the introductions, the woman who keeps coming out, I think she'll be up coming into the microphone. She steps up. Nope, actually introduce somebody.
Mark
Let's listen
Thompson.
in. Yep.
In the United States, she has written 93 pieces of legislation and co-sponsored over 1,600 bills. She is calling on Congress to recognize racism as a national crisis. And we got a Delta up here now, Delta Sigma Theta sorority. We have a lot of AKAs. Any Deltas here? And she's also a member of the Lynx. Please welcome Congresswoman Joyce Beatty.
Hey, good to see you. Thank you, thank you. I am joined by members of the powerful Congressional Black Caucus. We are here today because people died and were denied civil and economic rights. We are here today because 57 years ago, people marched for jobs and freedom and stood here with members of Congress and Martin Luther King. We are here today because George Floyd had a knee on his neck. 8 minutes, 46 seconds. Black Lives Matter. We are here, and I stand representing the Congressional Black Caucus, 54 members strong, who understand silence is not an option because black people face a symbolic chokehold every time we walk, speak up, shop, jog, drive, and yes, breathe. So we must tear down the walls of injustice. I am standing here and saying, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, in America, a riot is the language of unheard people. And what is it that America has failed to hear? Promises and freedom and justice for all. Say their names: Ahmaud, Breonna, George, Jacob, and the list goes on. Black Lives Matter. So let us pass the George Ford Justice in Policing Act. No more immunity for officers who looked boldly into cell phone cameras as they kill our brothers and sisters. Mandatory databases. Tamar Rice would have lived to see his 18th birthday. A ban on chokeholds and no-knock warrants. Eric Garner and Breonna Taylor would still be alive today. We are pushing to recognize racism as a national crisis. We are fighting for jobs, housing relief, access to capital, and a reparations bill. No, it was the black men, the brothers of the Congressional Black Caucus, who wrote the First Step Act. Know that it is a powerful black man in leadership who leads the John Lewis voting rights legislation. Demand, demand, demand the Senate to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act that restores justice, dignity, and equal access to the ballot box. I say to you, stand with us and stand with the Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network for this march and demanding that we get people registered to vote and that we vote, that we complete our census. Say it with me. Go vote, go vote, go vote, go vote. And let me say, tell them to get their knees off of our necks. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And yes, I'm Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, and I approve this message.
There you have it, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, Democrat from Ohio, with members of the Congressional Black Caucus there with a very pro-vote message, telling everybody to get out and vote this November.
There's a wide shot right there, the reflecting pool with the Lincoln Memorial there in the backdrop. And, you know, it's interesting, we were talking about the numbers. The original march that took place in 1963, they didn't know how many people were going to show up. They knew they needed thousands there. But when the head count was anywhere from 200 to 300,000 people, you couldn't stand anywhere along the reflecting pool. It was packed with people. And because of this pandemic, the word went out, listen, they wanted you there virtually, they wanted you there in spirit, they wanted you there watching television, and that's why we're doing this. We're just keeping it on the air so that you can watch it as though you're there. But there's probably, we were guessing anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 people crowded around the reflecting pool and in front of the Lincoln. So but they're all, from what we see, they're wearing masks and they are social distancing.
Right, and they do have to stand in some lines to get there onto the grounds, have to have their temperatures checked. So that's potentially slowing some people down from getting there in front of the Lincoln Memorial. Sam, what do you make so far of what we're hearing from these speakers? Pretty much what you were anticipating?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I've observed a number of these events, and you know, people come from different places. They have things to say, and they're kind of joyous occasions to some degree, because you do meet people who are, let's say, of a like mind, and so I think that's part of it. And as I look here, I mean, one of the things we've been hearing, particularly about the coronavirus, is that it is not as contagious in open areas outside. So, you know, assuming that they continue to keep their distance, you know, maybe it will help. And I've heard it said that they really haven't confirmed many cases of outdoors, you know, when they're in that situation. So obviously a concern, but nevertheless, the best place to be is probably at home watching it on television.
And we know that there's a number of states that the Mayor Bowser, had put on her list of, if you come into D.C., you're going to have to quarantine for 14 days before you can go out and about. And we know this morning, or last night, Delaware was taken off her list all of a sudden, which got me thinking that if Delaware now is acceptable, there's somebody in Delaware that might make an appearance. So we were talking about Joe Biden, who's running for president. We thought, well, maybe is he coming out of Delaware to come here?
I have not heard anything about that, like that. And I'd be surprised.
Yeah, I would be.
That would be an interesting twist. We'll have to see. All right, well, let's go ahead and take a listen, see what they're doing there at the podium. Do we have any sense of what's happening right now?
Even the VA system, Social Security, and all the programs of the federal government that make people live better. We believe that the government should be a force for good, that the government should protect us and not scare us, not suppress us. So we are here today to let you know that we will stand with you. Can we do this together? Can we do this together? If we can do this together, let me hear you say together. When I was a little boy, I used to hear my grandmother say that I don't feel no ways tired. I didn't understand it then, but I sure understand it now. I don't feel tired. I'm ready to march. I'm ready to move. I'm ready to make a difference. Let's change this country. Thank you.
From IUPAT.
IUPAT's in the house? Where you at? Somebody say something. I'm Ken Rick Maiden, General President of the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. We're a building trades union. You may think it's unusual for us to be here, but with me, growing up with a father, with a mother who looked like me, Black Lives Matter, don't they? Black Lives Matter? Black Lives Matter. I stand on the shoulders of my father and all black tradesmen who fought for better wages and conditions. Without their fight, I wouldn't be here today. Recently, we celebrated the 100th anniversary of IUPAT Local 1332. You may not think much about that. That's one of our unions that was a traditional African-American union formed over 100 years ago because they couldn't be in the regular union. But 100 years later, still up and fighting and a part of our organization. This is an opportunity for us because when I see the street, I don't just see people who look like me. I see America. And this is our opportunity to go forward and our opportunity to grow and our opportunity to have the country that has the vision that we have. All lives matter, but Black Lives Matter on top. Black Lives Matter first. Somebody saying it's easy. Black Lives Matter.
7 bullets in a man's back at point range. A knee pressed into a man's neck for 8 minutes. How much pain must black people endure? When will justice prevail? When is enough enough? There is pain in this country, in Louisiana and Texas, after another hurricane, in California, in the midst of raging fires, across the country, Donald Trump, with 180,000 people dead from COVID. And in so many families' hearts over the shooting of Jacob Blake, there is pain. So, Reverend Sharpton, how many times over how many decades have I and my union joined in this journey for justice? The 63 March started as a labor march for jobs and justice. A. Philip Randolph and Byron Rustin invited Martin Luther King Jr. to speak that day. And King said, "We've come to dramatize a shameful condition. That shameful condition, prejudice, discrimination, economic inequality, has not been cured. It's been metastasized. Underfunded schools, voter suppression, substandard housing, healthcare, and transportation, insufficient wages, high unemployment, discriminatory policing, mass incarceration. Black Americans who, whether from their higher rate of deaths from asthma or from COVID, have been struggling to breathe long before Eric Garner and George Floyd were suffocated at the hands of authorities. Justice and freedom must apply to all. The fight for opportunity and freedom must be all of our fights. And those of us who are white, we need to be real allies, real listeners, and real supporters. My synagogue's credo is the Psalm, and I quote, that the stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. There is room for all of us, but we must call out those who cling so tightly to their privilege that is an oppressive tool against equality. So, my friends, my colleagues, November 3rd is coming. We need to get in good trouble. We need to vote. We need to have hope. We need a president who will sign the bills that the House has passed to make this country more fair, more just, more equal. That is our job this day and every day. Thank you.
Can you recognize the postal union?
Can you imagine being...
And then I also, as you all know, need to recognize the Postal Workers Union.
All right. No time. Thank you. All right. Let's hear it for organized labor. Let's hear it for organized labor. Give them a round of applause. No time for them to speak, but the Postal Workers Union is in the house. Pray for our postal.
That's Mark, who has been a figure here in Washington. I think he lives in New York now, but he's been very active here. Back in the 79 or so, the late 80s, we had a movement here called Kiamsha, which was at UDC. He was a student there. He was the leader of this movement, and he's been around for a long time. He has a show on XM satellite radio. And for a while, my colleague Peggy Gilgannon and I were teaching at Ballou. We were teaching television. Mark was a radio teacher at Ballou High School. And so he is very involved in this community and now the New York community. And I see he seems to be serving as MC at this point.
Exactly.
I was going to say, can you imagine organizing this? I mean, they're doing a great job of getting everybody down to the microphone in time. There's a lot going on. Now you can see the crowd behind, and that's the pool of some of the speakers that are up there.
And of course, his first job, Mark Thompson's first job, he was like the manager for the Georgetown Hoyas.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead back down to Tom Rousey, who earlier spoke to Dr. King's son, who had a message for everybody. Hi, Tom.
Hey, Allison. Yes, we asked him several questions. Of course, he's one of the featured speakers of the day coming up. And as we've mentioned, it was 57 years ago today his father gave the I Have a Dream speech from the very spot where Martin Luther King III will be speaking later. One of the questions that I asked him was, given COVID, what he thought of the turnout today, and this is what he had to say.
This was never about numbers because of COVID. So whosoever could come and was willing, this is wonderful.
And we also asked him, and you may have been listening earlier, what his father would have thought about today. And he said, you know, he would certainly like the crowd came out and be very encouraged by that, but he felt also that his father may be discouraged that something like this was still necessary, in his words. Reporting live just a little north of the Lincoln Memorial, I'm Tom Rousey, ABC 7 News.
All right, Tom, thanks very much. And as we get back up to the podium, we can tell you what's taking a little bit of a delay as they get the speakers back up there now. We understand that with each speaker, they're taking off what they call the cover of the microphone. They're putting on a new cover, and then they're cleaning it, and then comes the next speaker. And this is all out of an abundance of caution and safety. Let's listen in.
Hurting from an epidemic of violence and racism, a cancer of the soul. We're hurting from a knee on their neck, a bullet in their back, hurting from leadership that treats them like their lives don't matter. President Lincoln, you would not recognize today's Republican Party. Our African-American brothers and sisters are not alone. Dr. King spoke of the inescapable network of mutuality. In this moment of crisis, so many Americans are bound together in the mutual struggle for justice, dignity, and opportunity. From the Native American tribes confronting the scourge of COVID and the delay of their stimulus funding, to Latinx children being separated from their parents at the border, to Asian Americans facing hate-fueled attacks, to working families across this country struggling with poverty. We can change all of this. With the right leadership, we can heal our wounds. We can turn hardship into hope, despair into dreams. We can advance racial equality and restore the soul of our nation. But only if we do it together. Movements are built by the many, not the few. They're built by the hard and unglamorous work of grassroots organizing. They're built, in the words of the late, great Julian Bond, by the marchers whose feet have grown tired, whose voices have gone hoarse, whose shirts have stained with sweat and dirt and blood. John Lewis, as you know, left us with these marching orders. So go to iwillvote.com, iwillvote.com, check your registration status. Tell your friends, family, and neighbors to make a plan to vote. Remember, November 3rd is the last day to vote, but it's not the first day to vote. Make a plan. Get out there. Do not let your voice go unheard. Do not let your voice go uncounted. This is the most important election of our lifetime. And make no mistake, you have the power to decide the outcome. Thank you very much.
Today, we commemorate the 57th anniversary of the historic March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. I was born into an activist family with my parents, my aunts and uncles pushing me in a stroller through Bay Area streets marching for justice in the years following the March on Washington. This moment is a reminder that we must always honor the sacrifice of the leaders who made that march happen. From the names we know, like Randolph and Farmer, Young and King, to everyone who worked behind the scenes and sacrificed quietly but profoundly, far from the lights of history. I have to believe that if they were with us today, they would share in our anger and frustration as we continue to see Black men and women slain in our streets and left behind by an economy and justice system that have too often denied Black folks our dignity and rights. They would share our anger and pain, but no doubt they would turn it into fuel. They would be lacing up their shoes, locking arms, and continuing right alongside us to continue in this ongoing fight for justice. Thankfully, we don't have to wonder if we are making them proud, because a giant from that march and the civil rights era of that day, John Lewis, he lived to tell us how we're doing. In his parting essay, he wrote to all of us who hope to carry his legacy, quote, "In the last days and hours of my life, you inspired me. You filled me with hope about the next chapter of the great American story when you used your power to make a difference in our society." For Congressman Lewis, the brutal murder of Emmett Till is what shook loose the activist inside him. It was the start of a lifelong journey toward service and driving change, the same journey that countless young leaders are building upon as we speak. As John put it, Emmett Till was my George Floyd. He was my Rayshard Brooks, Sandra Bland, and Breonna Taylor. The road ahead, it is not going to be easy. But if we work together to challenge every instinct our nation has to return to the status quo and combine the wisdom of longtime warriors for justice with the creative energy of the young leaders today, we have an opportunity to make history right here and right now. So thank you so much for inviting me to celebrate with you. Let's march on in the name of our ancestors and in the name of our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
We moved from the podium to a taped message from obviously Vice Presidential candidate Senator Kamala Harris, who had a message there. And now we're going to go back to the Master of Ceremonies to see who's coming to the podium next.
1963, in the person of Whitney Young, please welcome the former mayor of New Orleans, the president and CEO of the National Urban League, Mark Morrell.
Black Lives Matter. I want to thank Reverend Al Sharpton and the National Action Network, my friend and brother, as well as Martin Luther King III, for assembling us here on August 28th in the year 2020. In 1963, courageous men and women descended on this site, led by 6 legacy civil rights organizations, including the National Urban League. At that time, the National Urban League was led by one of the great Americans of the 20th century, Whitney M. Young, Jr. He stated from this very place at that time and on that day, on August 28, 1963, that our civil rights, our voting rights, our rights to human dignity were not negotiable. We have come back on August 28th in the year of 2020, in this 21st century, to say today that our fight for racial justice is not negotiable. We're here today to say that transforming our criminal justice system and purging it of mass incarceration and systemic racism is not negotiable. That protecting our sacred right to vote from suppressors, be they legislators, be they presidents, be they Russians, is not negotiable. That defending our right to a living wage so that every American can live in dignity is not negotiable. That dislodging structural racism that infects every institution in American life is not negotiable. That equitably funding all of our schools so all of our children can learn, and providing them with computers and broadband connectivity, and they can live and thrive with their God-given talents is not negotiable. That a fair and accurate census so that all of us are counted in accordance with the Constitution is not in 2020 negotiable. That eliminating the structural and shameful disparate impact of COVID-19 in 2020 is not negotiable. That reforming police, both police policies and police culture, and reallocating funding to summer jobs for youth, to mental health services, to homeless services, and to end the violence against our black men is not negotiable. Hands up, I can't breathe. Hands up, don't shoot. In 1963, when they gathered on this site, brothers and sisters, just a few weeks before they gathered, that great civil rights leader, Medgar Evers, was assassinated on the front lawn of his home in Jackson, Mississippi. At that time, they were fighting a poll tax, a literacy test, I should say, that did everything possible to prevent us from voting. In 2020, we come here when the very success of 1963, the Voting Rights Act, has been gutted by the Supreme Court. We come in 2020 where Jacob Blake and George Floyd and Eric Garner and Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin and Sandra Bland and too many black men and women, Breonna Taylor, have died or been disabled at the hands of the police. So we're here to make some demands. Number one, we want the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act to pass now, not tomorrow, not next week, not next year. Say it, pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Number two, we want to pass the HEROES Act. Number three, we want to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And number four, we want to pass H.R. 40 to look at reparations in this country. November 3rd, we will vote. So we're going to vote. If we have to put my mic
So either they cut his mic because we heard the music come on. They're kind of stringent about their time limit because they have a lot of speakers. Or they're just having technical difficulties. I think what they had there was mic was cut off.
I think you're right. And that was Mark Morial. He is the president of the National Urban League. And perhaps that is the case. He was going a little too long beyond his scheduled time. And so they're moving him on. I think he was checking the mic like, hey, what's going on?
Can you hear me now? Yeah, no, they do have a long list of speakers today. So they do want to get through them, and they've given them all a certain amount of time. And they really have choreographed this well so that they can get everybody up there to have their say.
And remember, the actual march is supposed to take place at 1 o'clock. We don't know for sure if that will still happen.
No.
And Sam, they'll be, can you tell us a little bit about the march route, what's going to be taking place?
Yes, what's going to happen is, and I'm predicting 3 o'clock.
Okay.
I don't know. What time? It's almost 1 o'clock
12:38, yeah.
I don't know. But in any event, what they're going to do, they're going to gather there, and then they're going to walk across Independence Avenue, and they're going to go on Ohio Drive, and then they're going to walk about half a mile and come up the backside of the Martin Luther King Memorial, and they will have a prayer there, is my understanding, and it's not going to be much going on there. They'll have a prayer there, and then they'll disperse.
Okay. Let's check in with Heather Graff now. She is at the north side of the reflecting pool for us. Oh, we're not going to go to Heather? Let's not go to Heather then.
Not yet.
All right, we're waiting for another speaker to get up there, and as soon as that happens. So what they're doing, though, by the way, I mentioned this earlier, they're changing out the microphone so that people can feel safe, because when they talk real loud, and some of them have actually been yelling, they want to make sure that they take that microphone cover off and dispose of it and put a new one on there. So they've been doing that, and that's causing a little bit of the delay.
Right, and we've talked all day about the precautions that are being taken because of the pandemic. From the beginning, Mayor Bowser really essentially telling people to stay home.
Right.
right, Sam? I mean,
she said stay home, and I asked her the other day. if she was going, and she said no.
Right.
She was not participating, and you know, I mean, if you're in a group that's, let's say, at risk or more at risk, you probably should stay home. One thing I've noticed here, people are in the water. I guess it's hot out there.
It's hot.
Folks are, I guess, trying to cool off, and that's what a reflecting pool is for, I guess.
So we understand Martin Luther King III will be speaking momentarily. Let's get back to the podium and see where they are now.
God bless the King family.
There you see them wiping it down, as we were just discussing,
right.
Sanitizing and switching out the microphone covers for whoever will be coming to the podium to speak next.
And it's a pretty good crowd. We've seen masks, we've seen the social distancing. That's what they're asking them to do. All right, let's listen, and they're getting ready to speak.
I am so honored to be here, but before I say something, I want you to hear from the future of our nation. The only granddaughter of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King, my daughter and Andrea's daughter, Yolanda Renee King.
Should I read this? Okay. Some of you may remember that 2 years at the March for Our Lives, I said, spread the word. Have you heard? All across the nation, we are going to be a great generation. That was in 2018. I didn't know what would hit us in 2020. A pandemic that shut our schools and put our young lives on hold. More killings of unarmed black people by police. Attacks on our right to vote. The worst economic crisis since the Great Depression that we learned about in school. And more extreme weather than ever before. But great challenges produce great leaders. We have mastered the selfie and TikToks. Now we must master ourselves. Less than a year before he was assassinated, my grandfather predicted this very moment. He said that we were moving into a new phase of the struggle. The first phase was the civil rights, and the new phase is genuine equality. Genuine equality is why we are here today and why people are coming together all across the world, from New Zealand to New Jersey. He said that we must not forget the days of Montgomery. We must not forget the sit-ins movements. We must not forget the freedom rides, the Birmingham movement, and Selma. Papa King, we won't! My generation has already taken to the streets peacefully and with masks and socially distanced to protest racism. And I want to ask the young people here to join me in pledging that we have only just begun to fight and that we will be the generation that moves from me to we. We are going to be the generation that dismantles systemic racism once and for all, now and forever. We are going to be the generation that calls a halt to police brutality and gun violence once and for all, now and forever. We are going to be the generation that reserves climate change and saves our planet once and for all, now and forever. And we are going to be the generation that ends poverty here in America, the wealthiest nation on earth, once and for all, now and forever. We are the great dreams of our grandparents, great-grandparents, and all our ancestors. We stand and march for love, and we will fulfill my grandfather's dream. So, show me what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks. Show me what democracy Show me what democracy looks like. One last time. Show me what democracy looks like. Okay, then let's show them.
That is the granddaughter of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.
A proud dad. Let me thank God that we've been able to assemble today, and to thank Reverend Sharpton and the National Action Network and all of the conveners that actually are here today, and most of all, these families that have been impacted by police brutality and misconduct. So we've come to bear witness, to remain awake, to remember from where we've come, and to carefully consider where we're going. Whether you're here in person, online, or watching on MSNBC and other networks, thank you for joining us for this March on Washington. Together, we are taking a stand, and we're taking a giant step forward. Let me also thank Al Green for the very, very warm introduction, my dear friend. But we're taking a step forward on America's rocky but righteous journey towards justice. August 28th is a day to remember the triumphs and tragedies that have taken place in our historic struggle for racial justice. Today, we commemorate the March on Washington to Jobs and Freedom in 1963, where my father declared his dream. But we must never forget the American nightmare of racist violence exemplified when Emmett Till was murdered on this day in 1955, and the criminal justice system failed to convict his killers. 65 years later, we still struggle for justice, demilitarizing the police, dismantling mass incarceration, and declaring and determinedly as we can that Black lives matter. In our struggle for justice, there are no permanent victories. For on this day, 12 years ago, I was honored to address the Democratic National Convention in Denver. And on that night, on that evening in the Mile High City, our spirits were soaring as the Democrats nominated Barack Obama, who would go on to become the first African-American president of these United States. But the progress we celebrated then is imperiled yet again. And now we must march to the ballot box and the mailboxes to defend the freedoms that earlier generations worked so hard to win. In so many ways, we stand together today in the symbolic shadow of history. But we are making history together right now. We're marching with the largest and most active multi-generational, multiracial movement for civil rights since the 1960s. From high school students to senior citizens, Black as well as white, Latino, Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islanders, Americans are marching together, many for the first time, and we're demanding real, lasting, structural change. We are marching together for time-honored goals and in timely ways. We are courageous, but conscious of our health. We are socially distant, but spiritually united. We are masking our faces, but not our faith in freedom. And we are taking our struggle to the streets and to social media. The nation has never seen such a mighty movement, a modern-day incarnation of what my father called the coalition of conscience. And if we move forward with purpose and passion, we will complete the work so boldly began in the 1960s. We're marching to overcome what my father called were the triple evils of poverty, racism, and violence. And today, those evils have exacerbated 4 major challenges that currently face our country. First, COVID-19 tragically has killed more than 175,000 Americans, disproportionately African American, and Latino, and low-income people in every background. Second, more than 30 million Americans are unemployed again, disproportionately people of color. COVID-19 has laid bare the structural and racial inequalities in our economy that kept too many people trapped in the debt and poverty. Third, police brutality and gun violence are killing so many unarmed African Americans. Today, we march with their families and we say their names: George Floyd, Boham Jean, Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Yusef Richardson, Terrence Crutcher, Trayvon Martin, Ahmaud Arbery, Elijah McClain, and so many others. And fourth, our voting rights are under attack. We must vigorously defend our right to vote, because those rights were paid for with the blood of those lynched for seeking to exercise their constitutional rights. They were paid for with the blood of civil rights workers, such as Sammy Young Jr., Goodman, Swerney, and Cheney, Jimmy Lee Jackson, Viola Luiso, James Reed. Those rights were paid for through the sacrifices made by heroes such as C.T. Vivian, Fannie Lou Hamer, Hosea Williams, and John Lewis. But since the United States Senate has failed to renew the Voting Rights Act, we have had to overcome a whole new trick bags of tactics to suppress our votes. Discriminatory voter ID requirements, cutbacks in early voting and vote by mail, voter purges targeting those who have missed several elections, and disenfranchising those who have served their time and paid their debt to the society. And now COVID-19 is making it dangerous, even deadly, to stand in line at polling places. We shouldn't have to risk our lives to cast our votes. We need to be able to do what President Trump does: vote safely by mail. But now we're struggling to overcome the dismantling of the U.S. Postal Service for the express purpose of suppressing our vote. With all these threats to our lives and liberties, our challenge is to use this moment to expand this movement, a movement that not only raises its voice, but casts its votes, pursues its vision, and makes lasting change. The scripture says, where there is no vision, the people perish. Our vision is best expressed by a phrase we must never forget. That is the beloved community. With those words, my father, John Lewis, Ella Baker, Rosa Parks, and so many other historic women and men envision an America whose dramatic practice is as good as its promise. An America where the triple evils of poverty, racism, and violence will be replaced by peace, justice, and shared abundance. And where hate and fear finally give way to help and love. To achieve that America, we need to raise our voices and cast our votes. Over the weeks ahead, culminating on Election Day, we need to vote as if our lives and our livelihoods, our liberties depend on it, because they do. No person, no people are more keenly aware of the risk of disenfranchisement than those who've suffered from it. There's a knee upon the neck of democracy, and our nation can only live so long without the oxygen of freedom. The strength must be exercised by more than rhetoric and more than marching. The simple challenge before us is that everyone can cast a ballot, and everyone who can must cast a ballot. And that ballot that is cast must be counted, and the result must be transparent and known to the whole world. And so today, I can call on everyone with the means to drive people to the polls, to make a plan for yourself, for your family and your neighbor, for those organizations and companies that care about democracy. I call on you today to offer your resources and your capacity to make sure every ballot is counted. If our forefathers were willing to die for the right to vote, we can work for the right to vote, and I will continue to call on you to act in the coming days. You know, my father was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, while standing in solidarity with poor working people, sanitation workers, whose slogans, "I am a man," was a statement that they were human beings with rights that should be respected and acknowledged. They were asking for safe working conditions, for a living wage, for recognition of their union, and for human dignity. They summed up their struggle with those 4 words, "I am a man." That simple but powerful slogan impairs movements today, from Black Lives Matter to Fight for 15 and to the Me Too struggle against sexual harassment and abuse. Movements of marginalized Americans are still trying to claim the dignity they've been denied. Martin Luther King Jr. fought for the dignity of work, and that fight is never ending. In 1963, the March on Washington demanded jobs and freedoms. In 1968, the Memphis sanitation strike workers that demanded, and the Poor People's Campaign insisted that working people should not live and labor in poverty. Those fights foreshadowed our struggle today to make the minimum wage a living wage, not a poverty wage. And we are fighting alongside the frontline workers, sanitation workers, healthcare workers, grocery workers, transport workers, food service workers, and so many more. They are praised for being essential, but they are treated as if they're expendable. While standing with sanitation workers in Memphis, Dad said, "So often we overlook the work and the significance of those who are not in professional jobs, of those who are not in the so-called big jobs. But let me say to you tonight that wherever you are or whenever you are engaged in work that serves humanity and is for the building of humanity, it has dignity and worth." Now we have a president who confesses greatness with grandiosity. But my father knew better. Everyone, he said, can be great because everyone can serve. He understood the human yearning for recognition. And in his famous speech, he explained that everyone wants to be a drum major, the leader of the marching band. And he challenged us to channel our drum major instinct into becoming drum majors for justice. While we honor our history, we must be a living movement, not a monument. If Dad were here today, I'm sure he would implore us not to deify him or selectively quote him when convenient. He would want us to be drama majors for justice, to champion the ideals he promoted, racial justice, social equality, and peace. And he would gently but intently challenge us not to dwell upon the past, but to live and labor in what he called the fierce urgency of now. So if you're looking for a savior, get up and find a mirror. We must become the heroes of the history we are making. And us means all of us. In 1963, after my father spoke, Bryant, the architect of the march, asked the participants to join in demanding that Congress pass strong civil rights and voting rights laws. More than half a century later, we must demand that the United States Senate stop blocking passage of the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Restoration Act. And so when we conclude today, let's remember that this is the commitment march in the spirit of 1963. I ask you to join me in pledging to act in 3 ways. First, because our civil and human rights are at stake in this election, I ask you not only to register and vote, but make sure that at least one other person registers and votes. Second, I ask you to commit to service and struggle in your community, from voter registration to raising the minimum wage, to demilitarizing the police. Get involved with one or more of many worthwhile struggles in your community. And third, I ask you to pledge, as my father and John Lewis did, to get into good trouble and do it nonviolently. Remember that in the fight against injustice, nonviolence doesn't mean passive acceptance. It means peaceful resistance. We must come together and join with the Black Lives Movement to raise our voices and say enough is enough. We must come with the Poor People's Campaign, the Climate Change and Environmental Justice Movement, the Women's March and Me Too movement, the Parkland students and March for Our Lives, and say enough is enough. Martin Luther King Jr. famously said that the moral arc of the universe is long but bends toward justice. But he was also the first to say that it doesn't bend on its own. We must do some work ourselves. In the final year of his life, he wrote in his last book, "Where do we go from here, chaos or community?" Well, my sisters and brothers and dear friends, in this defining moment for our history and our country, we must answer Dr. King's question. Will our answer be chaos or community? I believe some have chosen the answer with chaos, including the current occupant in the White House today. But we who believe must choose community, because if we choose community, we can avoid watching the dream turn into a permanent nightmare. If we choose community, 50 years from now, people will say that we were able to redeem the soul of America and begin to fulfill the promise of democracy by systematically eliminating systematic racism and exploitation. My friends, if we choose community, we will be able to answer in the affirmative to the scripture. Here comes that dreamer. Come, let's slay him, and we shall see what will become of his dream. Finally, this afternoon, I want to say to you, not only do I come as a protester, but I come as a victim. My daddy was killed when I was 10 years old. Gunned down, you know that, by assassin's bullet. Some of you know, but may not know. 6 years later, my daddy's mother, my grandmother, was gunned down in the church while praying the Lord's Prayer. So I understand what it means to lose a loved one. But I'm so thankful that my grandfather and my mother and my aunts and uncles taught me about love, because Granddaddy used to say, I refuse to allow any person to reduce me to hatred. The man that killed my lovely wife and the man that killed my son, I refuse to allow them even to reduce me to hatred. I love everybody. I'm every man's brother. If we're going to resolve these issues in America, we've got to come together. Dad talked about it in that sermon, Levels of Love. He talked about all of them. I'm only going to talk about the highest level of love. That love that seeks nothing in return. That love that is totally unselfish. You love someone if they're young, you love them if they're old. You love them if they're black, you love them if they're white. You love them if they're Native American. You love them if they're Hispanic or Latino American. You love them if they're African. You love them if they're Asian. You love them because you know that God calls you to do that. And if we're going to resolve all of these conflicts and crises in America, we got to find a way to do it in love. Thank you, and God bless you. And let's keep on keeping on.
57 years ago, his father stood in that same spot and gave the I Have a Dream speech. And today, Martin Luther King Jr.'s son is on those same steps, asking for the same thing that his father was asking for. And this is a young man. When he was a young man, he lost his father to an assassin's bullet, and he lost his grandmother to an assassin's bullet as well.
Picking up that message of peace and of love as he wraps up his remarks there. And we also got to hear from his daughter, Yolanda, a young woman who had her opportunity to speak at the podium too, and Martin Luther King III saying, this is our opportunity to hear from the future. Now, for our viewers on ABC 7, it's just after 1 o'clock. We're going to step away from this and go back to regularly scheduled programming. However, we will continue to have the Commitment March in its entirety on our sister station, WJLA 24/7. We hope you'll join us there.
And welcome back to our ongoing coverage here on 24/7 News. We are coming wall to wall with today's, not only the speeches being made, but the march that is supposed to take place. Little off schedule. The march was supposed to begin at 1 o'clock, is my understanding. Some of the speeches ran a little longer than they were hoping for, but again, we're just going to stick to it and we'll listen to the speakers as they come. Still to come is Al Sharpton and also the family members of those who have been killed by police officers.
And Martin Luther King III, one of the headlining speakers who we just heard from there, the King family. Let's go to our Justin Hinton. He is in the crowds down there today. And Justin, it looks like, at least from our vantage point, that the number of people, the crowd size, has picked up a bit.
Yeah, there are a number of people here. It's even hard to count. I was in the crowd a little earlier, and I got to tell you, a lot of people were concerned about social distancing. You see some of the signs, and they were really saying that they were going to take that into consideration, but at this point, there are just too many folks out here that are gathered. It's interesting, I was looking at some of the pictures from 1963, and you could see a number of folks in those pictures, but I'm hearing that Reverend Al Sharpton is getting ready to take the podium now, so we will send it back to you.
No justice! No justice! No justice! No justice! What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? When do we want it? 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 All right. 57 years ago, in 1963, there was a struggle in Birmingham, Alabama. There was the assassination of Medgar Evers, the head of the Mississippi NAACP. In the middle of struggle and murder, they came to Washington to demand that the federal government give them a Civil Rights Act and voting rights. They marched that day, in a hot, blistering day like today, saying that as we struggle, we need legislation. And they stayed on that movement until they got the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. They came young and old. They came from the South. Many of them couldn't stop on the road to use a bathroom because it was against the law, but they came anyhow. Many of them couldn't stop and eat in a restaurant. They had to put their sandwiches in a paper bag because no restaurant would serve them because it was against the law, but they came anyhow. Many of them couldn't rest in a motel overnight, but they came anyway because it was against the law for them to stop. Because they came in '63, we were able to come back in 2020, riding whatever we wanted to ride, stay in whatever hotels was available. They opened the door for us, but there's still some doors we have to open and some people we've got to straighten out. 2020, we must deal with police brutality. 2020, we must deal with those that want to rob our right to vote. And even though we are here in the midst of a pandemic, socially distancing, telling y'all to distance, I keep saying spread out. We want to come to show with our bodies that enough is enough. When I was headed to George Floyd's funeral, I talked with Martin III, and I said, you know, maybe we need to go back to Washington. He said, well, let's talk it out.
Reverend Al. As I was giving the eulogy, I announced this march. We didn't know how we were going to do it, how we were going to plan it, how many would come, but we did it. Why are we in Washington? I talked with one of the leading minds of our nation, Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, and he told me that, Reverend Al, you got to understand that until there's federal legislation, every state will do what it wants to do. We have passed in the House of Representatives the George Floyd Policing and Justice Act. Now we need to pass that act in the Senate. We need Mitch McConnell and the U.S. Senate to meet on the George Floyd Policing and Justice Act, or we're going to meet you senators at the poll in November 3rd, whether we got to mail in, walk in, ride in, crawl in. We want our bill passed. Several weeks ago, John Lewis, an outstanding congressman, made his transition. Last time Martin and I were here, he was with us, John Lewis. He and Reverend Hosea Williams and Amelia Boykin were beaten on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, tear gassed, that led to the Selma to Montgomery March that got us the right to vote. And that right lasted till 2013, when they took and gutted out the middle of that bill, taking away the map. Well, we come to Washington saying, how do you memorialize John Lewis and allow the bill that he stood for us to die? We want the John Lewis Voting Rights Bill for the Congress. So we didn't just come today to have a show. Demonstration without legislation will not lead to change. We didn't come out and stand in this heat because we didn't have nothing to do. We come to let you know, if we will come out by these numbers in the heat and stand in the heat, that we will stand in the polls all day long. They keep telling me about how it's a shame that black parents have to have the conversation with our children. How we have to explain, if a cop stops you, don't reach for the glove compartment, don't talk back. The conversation. Well, we've had the conversation for decades. It's time we have a conversation with America. We need to have a conversation about your racism, about your bigotry, about your hate, about how you would put your knee on our neck while we cry for our lives. We need a new conversation. Oh, we didn't come to start trouble, we came to stop trouble. You act like it's no trouble to shoot us in the back. You act like it's no trouble to put a chokehold on us while we scream, I can't breathe 11 times. You act like it's no trouble to hold a man down on the ground until you squeeze the life out of him. It's time for a new conversation. I wondered why. I asked Dr. Dyson, why did they have the march at Lincoln's Memorial? Why didn't they go to the Jefferson Memorial? Why didn't they go to the Washington Monument? And he told me, you got to understand, Reverend Al, 100 years before 63, 1963 was 1863. 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. He promised us full citizenship if we fought to save the Union. He promised us 40 acres and a mule. We never got the full citizenship. We never got the reparations. We come to Lincoln because you promised, Mr. Lincoln, and the promise has been broken. And we come like Dr. King came 57 years ago to say we are tired of broken promises. Some say to me, Reverend Al, y'all ought to denounce those that get violent, those that are looting. All of the families have denounced looting. What we haven't heard is you denounce shooting. We will speak against the looting, but when will you speak against wrong police shooting? I remember Reverend Dr. Y.T. Walker sat Reverend W. Franklin Richardson, who spoke today, and sat us down and said that after the Montgomery boycott and they had gone to Albany, Georgia, and the movement stalled because in Albany they treated them with a certain kindness. They said they wanted to find someone that would demonstrate the raw disregard for rights. And as they did, they went all over the South. And Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth told them to come to Birmingham because there was a police chief there named Bull Connor. And Bull Connor would act in an insensitive and brutal way. Well, in 1963 and 1964, they fought Bull Connor. Here we are in 2020. We've gone from Bull Connor to Bull Trump. We've gone from a mean-spirited sheriff to a mean-spirited president whose lips drink with the words of interposition and nullification. We do not want to be disrespected. How do you speak while this young man, Jacob, lies in a hospital and you won't call his name? How do you sit while Breonna Taylor's in a grave and you won't call her name? How do you sit while Eric Garner's in a grave and you won't call his name? How do you sit while George Floyd is laying in a grave and you won't call his name? Well, Mr. Trump, look right down the block from the White House. We come to Washington by the thousands. We gonna call their name. We gonna call their name. We'll never let America forget what you done. Call their names. This is the time. This is the time for legislative change. This is the time for us to vote like we never voted before. And don't just vote for the top of the ticket. Vote all the way down. go down from the top to the bottom, vote all the way to the dog catcher. We want to get rid of anybody that's in our way, because our parents died to give us the right to vote. You can mess with the mail, but it ain't the sacrifice that Goodman and Cheney and Swerner gave. Our vote is dipped in blood. Our vote is dipped in those that went to their grave. We don't care how long the line. We don't care what you do. We're going to vote not for one candidate or the other, but we're going to vote for a nation that'll stop the George Floyds, that'll stop the Breonna Taylors. They say when George Zimmerman was acquitted for the murder, when he was acquitted for the murder of Trayvon Martin, 3 young genius sisters wrote the slogan, Black Lives Matter. And it resonated. Why did it resonate? Because too long, you acted like we didn't matter. They said, well, everybody matters, but everybody hasn't mattered the same in America. Reason we had, and still have to say Black Lives Matter, is because we get less health care like we don't matter. Yes. We go to jail longer for the same crime like we don't matter. That's right. Tell it. We get poverty, unemployment, double the others like we don't matter. We treated with disrespect by policemen that we pay their salaries like we don't matter. So we figured we'd let you know whether we tall or short, fat or skinny, light skin or dark skin, Black Lives Matter, and we won't stop until it matters to everybody. Let the sister, if she want to hold up her fist, leave her alone. Let me say, as we hear from some of the victims, and as we get ready to march over to the King Memorial, 1963, Dr. King talked about he had a dream. Today, we heard from his heir and his son, Martin Luther King III, his beautiful wife, Andrea, and his granddaughter, Yolanda. And they are in their bloodline, the children and grandchildren of the dreamer. But we come in the same spiritual lineage, because I want this country to know that even with your brutality, you can't rob us of our dreams. Your bigotry can't rob us of our dreams, because we've always had to dream beyond our circumstance. We always had to dream of being what we were not allowed to be. We are the dream keepers, which is why we come today black and white and all races and religions and sexual orientations to say this dream is still alive. You might have killed the dreamer, but you can't kill the dream, because truth crushed to earth shall rise again. We gonna rise, never to fall again. We gonna stand up even when our legs are tired. We gonna make this dream come true. Let me say this. Let me say this as we close. Shh. I want everybody to be orderly. Let me say this. We all should leave here committed to keeping this dream alive. I want everybody that went to the website of National Action Network Net, nationalactionnetwork.net, that wants to help us on Election Day, be poll watchers to protect our vote. I want you that will be signing up. Early voting starts in 2 weeks. We, on a nonpartisan way, want to put people all over this country. They want to suppress our vote. We've got to have foot soldiers that will protect the vote and that will be out there. And I want you to say to yourself that you could have been so much more. You had ideas and dreams, not only as a race, but as a person. But society had their knee on your neck. We could have developed and been as successful as others, but society had their knee on our neck. But we're not gonna lay and submit no more. We're not gonna take it. Some have different tactics, but we all are rising up. You're gonna get your knee off our neck. If we gotta march every day, if we gotta vote every day, we will get your knee off our neck. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. No justice. No justice. No justice. No justice. All right. I want to bring out, I want y'all to back up. I want y'all to bring, to my left is the mother of Breonna Taylor.
Where the other family? We got them. Where they at? We got Acevedo family. We got the Blake family.
Say her name. Say her name. Say her name. Say her name. Let us hear from Tamika, the mother of Breonna Taylor. Give me
Hi, everybody. First, I just want to thank everybody who's been in support of getting justice for Breonna Taylor. Second, I just want to, I got to thank Louisville, Until Freedom, my family, and most importantly, Kenneth Walker, for coming out here and continuing to say her name louder. What we need is change, and we're at a point where we can get that change, but we have to stand together. We have to vote. I'm good. Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Say her name. Say her name. Say her name. All right, wait a minute. Shh. I brought Mr. Lincoln all of the broken promises. We all stopped when a man was killed with a knee on his neck, narrated his own death on videotape and didn't know they were recording. But his death has been the impetus of a global movement. I bring you his brother, the brother of George Floyd, Fionis Floyd.
George Floyd. Hey. Man. Hey. Thank y'all. Get my sister Bridget, my attorney Tony Romanucci, my wife Keita, my sister Tanya, my nephew Brandon.
Your brother too.
Okay.
You gotta go.
All right. I'm so overwhelmed right now with everybody's here right now. Man. Man, no, it's okay. Hey, I wish George were here to see this right now. That's who I'm marching for. I'm marching for George, for Brianna, for Ahmaud, for Jacob, for Pamela Turner, for Michael Brown, Trayvon, and anybody else who lost their lives or are too evil. Man. It's hard, man. I got you. It's never been more clear than change right now. It's happening right now because we demand it. Everyone here has made a commitment because they wouldn't be here for no other reason right now. It's hot, and I know it's hot, but as of now, we here because we are being fried right now, man. Man, Bridget, I'm trying. I'm good. I'm good. I got it. I got it. I got it, I got it. As of now, everybody out here right now, our leaders, they need to follow us while we're marching to enact laws to protect us. Man, it's hard, man. It's really hard. I'm so sorry, man. I can't, man. My brother George, he's looking down right now. He's thankful for everything that everybody is doing right now. Y'all showing a lot of empathy and passion, and I'm enjoying every last bit of it right now. If it weren't for y'all, I don't know where I'd be right now, because y'all are keeping me running. I have to advocate for everybody, man, because right now, Jacob Blake, I'm feeling, it's hard just to talk right now. Shot 7 times, man, with his kids. That's painful.
trying to. I'm done. I'm done. I'm letting my sister go. I don't forget all that crying.
I'm Bridget Floyd, George Floyd's sister. I want you guys to ask yourself right now, how would the history books remember you? What will be your legacy? Will your future generations remember you for your complacency, your inaction? Or will they remember you for your empathy, your leadership, your passion for weeding out the injustices and evil in our world? You know, Martin Luther King stood here 57 years ago, and he told the world his dream. But I don't think y'all know that we're here right now and have the power to make it happen. I don't think y'all hear me. But we have to do it together. We have to do it together for our generations to come, our children. My brother cannot be a voice today. We have to be that voice. We have to be the change. And we have to be his legacy. Thank you from the Floyd family. Say his name. Let's go. We done did our part. Let's go. You got your phone? Let's go. Come on. We going this way? Oh, okay.
No, we're going right back behind you. We're going right back.
No question.
Because we're going to line up for the march.
Now, shh. Wait a minute, y'all too close to each other. Y'all stretch your arms out and stretch out now. I know we outside and you got on a mask, but don't get that close. Y'all spread your arms and social distance. Y'all too tight up here.
Bring up the next family.
Next family, let's go. He said we need to bring up the next family, so we need to move. We gotta move.
Few days ago,
We need to go down that way. Let's go down. Let's go out that way. Straight down. Because the next
Okay.
family cannot get through.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
Follow Quincy. I'll try to say follow Quincy.
Yeah, go ahead, follow Quincy. Okay, go ahead, Quincy. Come on, sister.
Follow Quincy.
Give a hand to Floyd family as we get ready. Please have one speaker. Shh. Now, y'all are too loud. Why are you screaming? Now, a few days ago, I got a call and talked to a father whose son was shot in Kenosha Wisconsin. 7 times in the back. While he was running into his car, policeman had the edge of his T-shirt. There was no weapon in his hand. There was no threat to the policeman. By law, a policeman should only use deadly force when they are on a life extenuating circumstance. What could have been the circumstance when a man's running away from you? What could have been the circumstance when a man is trying to get in his car? Now they say they may have found a knife in his car. Well, did they examine the police to see if they had X-ray vision to see through the car door? When he shot him, he didn't know what was in the car. What he knew was that a black man seems to be expendable. And we come to say we are no longer expendable. We are going to demand justice. His mother and father are both here. His mother got a little heat exhaustion and is sitting in the tent. But I bring you the father of this young man who we are all rallying for. This is Jacob's daddy, who said to me, I'm gonna fight for my son. I'm gonna fight for justice. Let's welcome to the platform, Jacob Sr.
Hey, we need to make way.
Jacob Blake, say his name. Say his name. Say his name. Say his name.
She's gonna say something for her mother.
His sister's gonna first speak for the mother who's here in the tent.
America, unapologetically, I am here to tell you in front of the world that you got the right one. God has been prepared me. America, your reality is not real. Catering to your delusions is no longer an option. We will not pretend. We will not be your docile slave. We will not be a footstool to oppression. Most of all, we will not dress up this genocide and boo and call it police brutality. We will only pledge allegiance to the truth. Black America, I hold you accountable. You must stand, you must fight, but not with violence and chaos. With self-love. Learn to love yourself, black people. Unify. Group economics. Black women, you are your brother's keeper. I know it's heavy, but forgive him and heal. His manhood was taken from him a long time ago. Build him up. Black children, read, learn, grow, and live, and question everything. Black men, stand up. Stand up, black men. Educate yourself and protect the black family unit, period.
No justice. No justice. No justice. Jacob Blake. Jacob Blake. Jacob Blake. There are two systems of justice in the United States. There's a white system and there's a black system. The black system ain't doing so well. But we're gonna stand up. Every black person in the United States is gonna stand up. We're tired. I'm tired of looking at cameras and seeing these young black and brown people suffer. We're gonna hold court today. We're gonna hold court on systematic racism. We're gonna have court right now. Guilty.
Yeah.
Guilty. Guilty. Racism against all of us. Guilty.
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 Racism against Trayvon Martin. We find them guilty.
Guilty.
Racism against George Floyd. We find them guilty.
Guilty.
Racism against Jacob Blake. Abdul Dawala. If I said the name wrong, Allah forgive me. Guilty.
Guilty.
And we're not taking it anymore. I ask everyone to stand up. No justice! No justice! I met this man when I was 7 years old. How did I know I was gonna meet this man again in these circumstances? I truly did not want to come and see y'all today for these reasons. My father was in town for the first march on DC. I have a duty. I have a duty to support and understand each one. I love everybody in this crowd. I love you. If nobody told you today, Big Jake loves you. But we're gonna stand up, baby. We're gonna stand up together. I need your strength. Big Daddy's legs ain't that good anymore. I need your strength. No justice.
No peace.
No justice.
No peace.
I love y'all.
I want to bring Attorney V.I.V. Lamont, who represents these families. Then I want Attorney Stewart to come, who represents others. There are many families here, and I think we should hear from a few more before we march to the King Memorial.
Good afternoon, D.C. I'm Attorney B.I.V. Lamar. I represent the Joel Acevedo family, who was killed in the city of Milwaukee by an off-duty officer before George Floyd and was strangled for 10 minutes. I also represent the family of Jacob Blake, who was unhumanly just killed, shot 7 times, but he lives today. At this time, I want to just thank Reverend L. Sharpton and the National Action Network for having this event here today, because action is what we're here for. I'm gonna tell you right now, we tired of talking. We tired of talking. We tired of playing games. 2020 is the year that America is gonna be put on timeout. We thank the Milwaukee Bucks. And all the NBA teams who sacrificed their game for this special cause. We thank the Major League Baseball. We thank all the actors, entertainers, celebrities across this country who utilize their platform for justice. Today, I just want to let you know, this is the last season of the police version of How to Get Away with Murder. We know your playbook. We know your plays. Step 1, claim that you in fear. Find an object or an action and say that you in fear so that you can justify killing a black or brown person. Step 2, assassinate that black or brown person. And then step 3, you assassinate his character. Then after you get to step 4, you delay your investigation. You exaggerate it. You got the video that takes 20 seconds to watch, but you take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months to say you're still investigating. And then when you call an uproar around our community, then you attack our protesters that are gathering peacefully and take any extreme and use tear gas against them. I want to let you know, we're here today because the game is over. This timeout is not in vain. We know your plays, and it's over. It is training day for police officers and law enforcement agencies across the country. It is training day. If you don't train your officers on the standard operating procedures and get them racial bias training, the great civil rights lawyers of this country will hold you accountable. And I'm gonna let you right now, it's not gonna be cheap because Black lives matter. I want to thank you right now all across this country for standing up for justice, standing up for this very important cause. The time is now to take change, and we're not going to stop until we get it. And we're going to shut it down if we don't get it. If we don't get it, thank you. No, yeah, I'll stay there.
2 minutes.
Now I'm going to bring up the family of Joel Acevedo, another case in the state of Wisconsin where an officer strangled an innocent man for 10 minutes.
Ooh. Let us free. We need to be free. We are free people. I come down here to let everyone know, and let these governments know as well, that we have rights. And if there's not going to be no justice, there's never going to be no peace. I love this. This is what God wants our brothers and sisters to stand in one and unity with the Hispanics, Asians, every different nationality that is standing for right. Joel Acevedo did not deserve to die. He was my son, invited to a police party where there was drugs and alcohol. The city of Milwaukee's been hiding this case. They choked him for over 10 minutes into the officer's house, Michael Mattioli, along with his 2 accomplices that they want to use as witnesses, Andrew Joukowsky and Eric. Mr. Peterson, I tell you right now, America, wake up, because you're going to get a rude awakening. And we come against you, Satan, in the name of Jesus Christ. We stand for what's right. Thank you. I love you all.
As we bring on Attorney Stewart and the family of Ahmaud Arbery, hold it. We're trying to get everybody in. As we get the next set of family members to come forward and then prepare to march to the King Memorial. Many athletes and artists have stood for justice. One of them said, I'm coming to sing for the family. May we hear from internationally acclaimed artist B.B. Winans.
I've been watching her for a half hour. Y'all think I'm blind? Oh, no. No justice! Music, man. This song I wrote after the death of Freddie Gray. My son at the time was 15 years old. And all I remember was seeing my son's eyes in Freddie's eyes. And I went to the piano and I wrote a song, not just for my son, but for every son and every daughter that's represented. Black lives matter. I said, Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Tomorrow hope to see his eyes looking back at me with that smile, his possibilities and our plans don't take away from me. With your hands at night, I close my eyes and I pray, Lord, cover him with love and your grace. How can you know his heart, my friend, when already judged him by his skin? See, it's the right to live that we're after. Wanna trade my tears to laughter. 'Cause in one moment dreams are shattered. Our sons and daughters matter. Yes, black lives matter. So let my words resound clear with hands lifted high and revered urgently regard, dispel fears in hope of saving lives that we hold dear. Yes, we do. See, it's the right to live that we're after. We must trade our tears for laughter. 'Cause in one moment, dreams are shattered. Our sons and daughters, they matter. Yes, they do. Black lives
eyes looking back at me. B.B. Winan, Attorney Stewart.
I'm Attorney Chris Stewart with Attorney Justin Miller, and I bring you words and thanks for the support that y'all have given us in all of our cases. On behalf of Gianna Floyd, the daughter of George Floyd. On behalf of Rashard Brooks, and Tamika Brooks is in the crowd. On behalf of Walter Scott and Alton Sterling and all of the other names, the support is because of the community here, because of Rev, because of Lee Merritt, because of Ben Crump, because of all of the people that are standing up and fighting. 57 years ago, we were standing right here, trying to fight poverty and oppression. That illness has not changed. There has been no vaccine for racism. There's been no quarantine for police brutality. And that's what we're here for today, because we're all the cure. All of these families up here, their children are not victims, they're the vaccine. Thank you for your support. Continue to fight, because without you, we're nothing.
Let us hear. Attorney Merritt is bringing the mother, the sister of Barthan John, killed by a policewoman who said she thought it was her house. Let us hear from his sister.
We're getting Wanda down now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Elisa Findley. I first want to thank the National Action Network. I would like to thank the National Action Network, Reverend Al Sharpton and Martin Luther King III for organizing and convening this march. Both of them, Ja is my brother. September 6th marks 2 years since I last heard his voice, heard his laugh, 2 years since my family has felt whole. Because September 6th will be 2 years since Amber Geiger shot my brother through his heart. Both of them died while sitting at his home, eating ice cream and watching football. He was minding his own business. Since then, I have been on a mission to seek reform to the severely broken justice system, because both of them would still be alive today. Instead, we are 9 days away from the 2nd anniversary of his murder. 2 years of saying his name and Antoine Rose's name, 10 years of seeking justice for DJ Henry, 4 years of saying Terrence Crutcher's name, saying Chantel Davis, Delron Small, Sandra Bland, Tatiana Jefferson, and so many others. I am tired of learning new names, adding new hashtags to an already long list of victims of police terror. We cannot allow our brothers and sisters to only be remembered for how they died. We need to continue to push for change so that their lives were not taken in vain. We are all in this together. We are our brothers and sisters' keeper. Thank you.
Wanda here. Yeah, she's right here. Go ahead and give her a little introduction. Yeah, this is her right here.
The mother of Ahmaud Arbery, young man jogging, shot down in cold blood in Georgia, Brunswick, Georgia. Give Wanda a big hand.
I stand before you as the proud mother of Ahmaud Arbery. I'm carrying a very broken heart, but also a grateful heart that God chose my son, Ahmaud Arbery, to be a part of this most huge movement. I do believe if we continue to stand and fight together, that we will get change.
That's right.
Sadly, we have these type of tragic events far too often. But I want each of you to please don't forget their names. Please let their names live forever. I want to share 3 words with you that I know Ahmaud would want me to share with you as well, and that is, I love you. I love you all for standing with us.
We love you.
I also want you guys to help me chant his name, and maybe he'll hear it in the heavens. Say his name.
Ahmaud Arbery!
Say his name.
Ahmaud Arbery!
Thank you, and I love you.
I can skip one. Yeah, you don't have to do me at all.
You spoke, man.
No.
Okay.
1 minute.
Let us hear from Attorney Lee Merritt.
Black power. I said black power. Black power. Look, we cannot be afraid to stay black power. You cannot say that Black Lives Matter if you don't believe in black power. Black power. The only way we stop this from happening is when we begin to exercise our own power. I've been hearing a lie from the Republican National Convention all week, and they keep telling me that this man freed the slaves. Let me tell you something. Lincoln didn't free no slaves. We freed the slaves. We free ourselves when we fight for ourselves, and we fight for ourselves through black power. Say it with me, black power. Black power. Say their names, Tatiana Jefferson, Jamal Roberson, Ahmaud Arbery, Botham Jean, Oscar Grant, Seville Smith, DeAndre Yarber, Terrence Crutcher. It's so many names we can't say them all, but listen, when we say black power, that means it all. So one more time so they hear you in the White House. Black power.
Let us hear from the father of Ahmaud Arbery.
Oh,
If y'all ask one more time. One thing, I just want to thank God for all support for my son and his mother. I just want to say it's been a hard road because my boy been lynched by 3 white men. And it's been a hard road for me and my family. And sometimes I find myself saying, I can't believe it. But it's real because I sit back, I'm used to my boy calling me every day and telling me he loved me. And sometimes I be like, wow, he forgot to call me. And it just ain't real, I can't believe it. So I sit back and say, my boy gone, he's not coming back. So me and his family got to be his boys now. And we got to keep on fighting. And I'm gonna fight, because I'm a fighter. I'm not gonna stop till God call me home. Right. More power to the people, and thank y'all. Right.
Can we also say the name Trayvon Martin? Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin. Please welcome Trayvon Martin's mother, our hero, our shero, Sabrina Fulton. As she comes, Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin. Sabrina Fulton.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I just want to say, even though we're going through a crisis, Even though it looks dark, I want to tell you to be encouraged. I want to tell you, in spite of what we go through, be strong, stand tall, be encouraged. Don't stop saying Black Lives Matter. Don't stop peaceful protesting. Don't stop praying. Don't stop uniting. Stand together. This is what this is about. We was built for this. And last but not least, I want to leave with you my favorite Bible verse. It's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, and it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path. So regardless of what you're going through, trust in God. He's the only thing that matters. Stand up, people. Stand up. We was built for this. Keep fighting.
Amen. Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin. Trayvon Martin. Let's give a round of applause to Sabrina Fulton. All of these families for their strength and their courage. Another brother who the NYPD killed, Eric Garner. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. We have now Eric Garner Jr., and if you all would let her make her way to the rostrum, Eric Garner's mother, Gwen Carr. Come on, Eric Garner Jr., give him a round of applause.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. It's been 6 years since my father's words became our words. We have to make a change. I'm challenging the young people to go out and vote. It's possible for a change. We just have to put in the work. Go out and find out what we have to do and what people we have to vote in to make a change. We here to march peacefully. I don't want to see no looting. I don't want to see no nothing. Just march peacefully. I'm Eric Garner Jr. That's my message.
Hold on. We have the mother of Oscar Grant, ladies and gentlemen. Just a word, quickly, please. What's your name? Rhonda Johnson, ladies and gentlemen. Rhonda Johnson.
Good afternoon. I want you to know that this race is not given to the swift nor to the strong, but to the one who endures. And we are a fighting people. Micah 6:8 says, what does the Lord require of you? To walk humbly and justly. And when we think about justice, we look as a people, we have not received the justice that we deserve. And it's going to require each and every one of us to continue to band together, to continue to march, to continue to protest, to continue to call the injustices unjust. And you, as a people, we as a people, can make it happen. We can change some of the laws that are before us. If we band together, I have with me my brother, Cephas Johnson, Uncle Bobby, and we are here to fight till the end because we know from Oscar's case, only 11 months in the county jail. Where is the justice? Where is the justice? We look at liberty, and liberty is imbalance. And until we as a people begin to fight like we are fighting on today, like Martin Luther King had that dream, and so we must have the dream that we're going to see equality of all people. I am Oscar Grant.
Say his name. Say his name. Say his name. Say his name. Louder, say his name. All right, we love you.
We got a couple more out of respect. We just need everyone to bring very brief greetings so we can line up to march. The mother of Dontre Hamilton, give her a round of applause.
The people have the power. We will show up on November the 3rd to take our country back. We will show up November the 3rd to take our family back.
There's no order. And
I am Dontre Hamilton's mother.
You know, that's just not even fair.
He was shot 14 times for sleeping in a park. I will never stop fighting for you. Let's fight together. Vote.
Hold on.
Sisters and brothers.
My grandmother is here.
Where is she? Sisters and brothers, let me just say this. The problem is, the police have killed so many of us, there's not even enough time for us to hear from every family. But I'm going to acknowledge the families that are around me, just acknowledge who's here. The family of Stephon Clark is here. Hold your fist up, brother. The family of Michael Brown is here. There's Leslie. Come stand next to me, Leslie, just so people can see you. The family of Seville Clark is here. Seville Smith, I'm sorry.
Terrence Crutcher.
The family, Terrence Crutcher's twin sister is here. Who am I leaving out? David Jones is here. Am I leaving anybody out? Who? Philip Pennell, the family of Philip Pennell. Antoine Rhodes. Montez Hambrin. Are you his mother? The mother of Montez Hambrin. Look. Emmanuel Lee. You see all the names that are being called.
Clark, yeah, there you go.
We want to pray for all of these families. Pamela Turner. Tamir Rice, please. Niles Arrington, please. Please follow the instructions of the marshals and begin to line up to my right.
Leslie's gonna speak.
As we begin to march. Y'all all right with one more, Leslie?
Yeah,
everybody good?
Leslie's gonna speak. Yeah, and then Stephon Clark gonna speak.
Well, no, I'm not doing all that.
We doing too.
No, we're not. We're not gonna do anything. No, we can't do it, bro. There's no time. We gotta march. We gotta march. Move to the. You're on TV though, brother Stephen. You're on TV.
I don't get on TV more than once.
Yeah. I know. You're on camera. Okay.
We didn't come out from California or nothing.
All right.
On my mama kids.
You need to. So, let's let everybody line up. You can see the crowd shifting to the right. Let's make way for these families to lead the march. You get over there, maybe you can jump on the mic over there. All right? I'm sorry. It's just one person after another. It's coming, brother. Who? Tony Robinson. And then I gotta let everybody speak, and we don't have time.
I know, but she might be speaking right now. Because she's been here since this morning.
That's Reverend Sharpton.
So they are now, the speeches are pretty much wrapped up. They're going to be organizing the march where they'll go from the Lincoln Memorial over to the Martin Luther King Memorial. So they'll be making a march around, basically around the reflecting pool, and then back over toward the tidal basin for that, what they'll be giving a prayer, our understanding is over there.
Yeah, not exactly sure how long it will take to mobilize everyone and to begin that march, but we're going to stay with our coverage here. Some powerful moments. You know, we heard from the Reverend Al Sharpton, who of course has spearheaded this commitment march for the most part, and he brought in family members. And I think one of the most powerful moments came from the family of George Floyd's brother and sister both having difficulty even getting through their remarks. Just the magnitude of the moment, the magnitude of the crowd size, overwhelming to them. And I think that really drove home the point of why so many people came out there today. And also, Jonathan, during the time that we've been on the air listening to these speeches, we've heard some news develop too with regard to all of this, one having to do with the NBA.
Yeah, the NBA and also the MLB, the Major League Baseball, they boycotted the playoffs for the NBA. And we didn't know when they would resume play. We understand they will be resuming play tomorrow, is our understanding. But a part of the agreement or the negotiations that went on to get the resumption of play was that all of the places where they play, all the auditoriums, all the pavilions, all the arenas, those will be voting places. They're going to make them polling places during Election Day. And that was a part of the agreement so that more people had access or could go out and vote. So all the major leagues will be playing. The WNBA, the NBA, and the MLB will be going back to work tomorrow. That's our understanding. But again, you're right, mobilizing all these people, and they tried to do the best they could today's march, which does come 57 years to the day that Martin Luther King Jr. stood on those same steps and recited his speech. And, you know, if you ever read the body of his speech, and I know a lot of history students in school will study that speech because it's really one of the iconic speeches and a turning point in our nation's history when it comes to civil rights. But you read that speech, and it's pretty much halfway down the body of the speech that he starts to break into, "I have a dream." And it was fascinating to listen to Sam Ford, who's with us here this afternoon. And Sam, you know, when he's up there giving this speech, you know, first of all, he was a preacher, so he was very good on his feet. He didn't need a teleprompter. He really didn't even need a script. Once he got into, you know, reading what he wanted to say from his heart and his head, it just flowed out. And then somebody yelled, "Tell him about your dream."
Mahalia Jackson told, he had, in Detroit, I guess the week or so earlier, he had given his "I Have a Dream" speech there, and it had gone over very well, and Mahalia Jackson had been there. And so at that point, she said, "Martin, tell him about the dream." And at that part, Martin Luther King went into the dream. I got to tell you something else about that speech. It's interesting. When I was a child, and growing up in Kansas, and I think it probably occurred in a lot of places in this country, in the morning you would sing a song, and it was called "My Country 'Tis of Thee."
I remember.
Sweet Land of Liberty. And so Martin Luther King knew that song, and he knew Americans knew that song. And so he took the song, and he says, the song says, "Let freedom ring." And he said, he starts then talking about, "Let freedom ring from the Alleghenies of Pennsylvania
to the mountains of Colorado and to California.
Let freedom ring from the, you know, the Lookout Mountain, from the, the Rockies." Then he says, "But not just that, right? Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee," which is Chattanooga.
Right.
Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia, which is Atlanta.
And Alabama as well.
Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. And so this song that kids probably in all over America sang, people could relate to that.
Right.
And it's something where, you know, today people may not know that, but at that time it had a great meaning because children sung that song in the morning in my school, and I think in schools all over this country.
As well. And I think I implore people to go read that speech now. He never would use a word or phrase that didn't have significance or meaning. And you have to understand the history of the time, because when you go through that script, I mean, the speech, literally, he was pointing his fingers at the people that were causing the biggest problems in Alabama and in Georgia and in Tennessee. And you know, if you understood the history, you're thinking to yourself, good for him. I mean, he's calling out the people that are causing the biggest problem, but he did it in a way that was civil. And his whole idea was, let's do this peacefully. We don't need any violence.
Well, that was it. And I think from what I could read about that time from the press here in Washington, you know, this is a peaceful march. There was no real concern, but there was some fear there that, you know, I don't know if you recall, we did the town hall.
Right.
We asked Virginia Ali what was the atmosphere like. She says, "We were afraid. They thought there would be riots in the streets." And so people that lived in Washington were really fearful.
Right.
But of course, it turned out to be a fine occasion. But you know, that's it. Right. You know, I remember when they had the Million Man March here. I was at up near Woodley Plaza, and a tank came off of a truck. I thought, they're bringing tanks in? Well, as it turned out, there was a defense show at one of the hotels.
Oh, well, there you go.
So they wanted to have a tank out there, but see, your immediate reaction is like, oh, what is this?
Yeah.
So,
And today we're seeing, you know, you mentioned children listening to that song and knowing it when they were children. We had his granddaughter there to hear from her today, which is so symbolic, and the fact this march is going to end at the Martin Luther King Memorial is fantastic. And we want to go out to our crews in the field. They've been standing by, and we want to hear from them. Let's begin with Heather Graff. Hi, Heather. How's it going down there?
Allison. Well, we're standing here. You can see behind me the Lincoln Memorial there in the background. Of course, we knew this event would have a focus on racial equality and a call for an end to police brutality. There was also a lot of talk about rallying people to get out to vote in November. Several speakers referenced the late Congressman John Lewis, civil rights icon who, of course, fought so hard for the right to vote. I want to step out of the way so we can just show you the scene here behind me. That march happening right now, but some people choosing to kind of start heading home, leaving the Lincoln Memorial here. We talked to several people in the crowd earlier today about what this march means to them. Take a listen.
I'm almost 80 years old, and I wanted to make sure if it took my life to bring me here today, because this mess needs to stop. They don't recognize who God is, but with God, there is no color. There is no color with God. It's only love, and they don't know that.
It's important to me because when this was done the first time, I was only 3 years old. So being as this is the 57th anniversary, I wanted to be here for this occasion. It marks a lot of things, not just its justice, but a lot of things that need to be done as far as progress for our people.
All right, and that was just a few of the protesters we met today, people who traveled from all over the country to be here for this commitment march that is, of course, happening on the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington. We'll send it back to you for right now, but we'll be out here checking in with folks over the next few hours.
All right, Heather, thank you very much. And we mentioned other items worthy of news that took place during this march today. We talked about the NBA and other sports teams. Also, the Wisconsin State Senate. They are going to have a special session on Monday, and this special session will be to discuss police reform, all in the wake of the Jacob Blake shooting. Of course, this took place in Kenosha, sparked all these demonstrations and what's been happening in Kenosha since then. So the speakers here at the podium today talking about wanting to affect change. And that, of course, is one thing. Some may see it as a small thing, some may see it as big. But again, the Wisconsin Senate calling a special session on Monday to discuss this issue.
And it's interesting. I have friends, over the course of my career who have been, I've known them for a long time, and they're in law enforcement. Los Angeles, which is a huge police department. New York, big police department. Down in Tampa, big police department there as well. All three of them said, without question, they were all leaders within the thing, the captains and lieutenants. They're saying that training is now being reevaluated within their departments. So the change is going to have to come from within. They're going to have to figure out, do we give enough training? Obviously, we have, lethal force, and we go through an academy, which is about anywhere from 16 to 18 weeks. How much time and attention is paid to how and when to use lethal force, and how much training is going into how to diffuse and de-escalate situations that are otherwise tense? Because, in a lot of cases, you look at the size of what's happening and where they're going. They're not necessarily being thrust into a positive situation. They're going to what could potentially be a very dangerous situation. But holding lethal force, they have the control to defuse it. And so I know from those three different departments, I have to believe that a lot of other departments are doing the same thing, a little self-examination, maybe looking at how much training is given. And if today's goal was to have, we need police reform, I think a lot of that's happening on its own because of all that has happened.
As we look here at our live cameras, we see the crowds beginning to march around D.C. We touched on the weather earlier. Heat emergency was going to feel the heat index was like 97 degrees. Well, since then, we've also had a severe thunderstorm watch be issued for the majority of the DMV, and that is set to last through 8 o'clock. Obviously, there's no rain happening right there, but it's something to keep in the back of everybody's minds as the crowds gather.
As we bring Sam in to talk about this too, we were talking about the temperature back in 1963, it was 87 degrees. It was very warm out there, and today even hotter than that by 10 to 12, 15 degrees maybe, because it's just beaming down on the concrete and the marble. And so there's people standing in the reflecting pool to try and cool down. We saw that.
Yeah, I thought it was a good idea. You're nearby to cool off. But yeah, I guess it's about like it is today. I mean, a little bit hotter. But looking at the pictures, there were a lot of people wearing white, and there were a lot of people with these hats on, I guess, to sort of try to deflect the heat, if you will. But you know, August in D.C. is normal.
Yeah, and this would have been much bigger march if not for the pandemic. Because of the pandemic,
sure.
so many people were being kept from coming into the state because there's a rule out now. The mayor put out a notice saying, if you're in any of the states that is experiencing a hot spot when it comes to COVID or a bigger outbreak, we don't want you here. And if you come here, you got to stay 14 days in quarantine before you can go out. So.
Which people ignored. I interviewed a number of people yesterday on the mall, and I think I interviewed one person from a state that was not on the bad list, if you will. Somebody from New York, but they were from California, they were from Texas, they were from Wisconsin, they were from Alabama, and all those states are the no-no states.
Yeah, those are
but,
the ones. Yeah.
I don't think, first of all, I don't think the people knew about it, and you know, it's,
and nobody's there to enforce it on the border anyway.
How do you do something like that?
That's the question.
Yeah.
And the mayor herself, you said, was not going to come down, and she was making it clear she wanted people to watch from home, but beyond that.
But certainly, to give the mayor some kudos, I mean, the concern was there. So at least the people organizing the march realized this was important, and we all heard Al Sharpton say, spread out, you're standing too close.
He was like, you're close down there and you're too close to me, so move over.
The two things I heard him say, you need to stop yelling and you guys need to back up.
That's it.
So I understand our producer, Aaron, did you say we have Dave Lucas? Okay, so Dave Lucas is standing by to add a little bit to our conversation, which you always do so well, Dave, and we appreciate it. You came up here to see us in the studio a short time ago, and you were remarking about just how significant it is that not necessarily this march is happening, because this happens in Washington all the time, but when it's happening.
To me, the importance and the lasting significance of this, the significance is all those folks who are currently now marching over toward the King Memorial. The lasting significance of this is when all this is happening. Protests happen on the National Mall all the time. You go to Wikipedia and you get 14 pages of marches that have happened since just the turn of the 20th century. So there are a lot of marches, a lot of protests, a lot of demonstrations. But what is significant to me about this, and where this one will go down in history, I believe, is the time in which it happened, because it is the time when 180,000 Americans have died from COVID-19, and there are millions of people who have gotten this infection. It's at a time when 18 million Americans are out of a job just since February. Think about that kind of economic dislocation for a while. And it's also the day after they wrapped up a national political convention, not at a big convention hall in one of the great cities of America, but over at the south lawn of the White House, just a few blocks away. A remarkable sequence of events. 2020 has, from the very beginning, been a year the likes of which are almost singular. Talking to Sam Ford earlier, those of us of a certain age remember 1968 as being one of the most turbulent and tumultuous years in the history of this country. I think you're going to have to add 2020 to that, and it may be giving 68 a run for its money. So that this could happen on the National Mall, and by all accounts, peacefully and under the blistering August skies, that it has apparently come off for the most part without a hitch. That, to me, is the important thing here, not that there's been another demonstration or another march or another protest on the mall. It's when all this happens that, to me, is the singular thing.
Also, Dave, the people we heard from, we hear from the family members of people who are directly affected by this. And I'm not sure that that's always the case in these marches. You always have lots of officials, lots of big names and celebrities, but the most powerful moments came from the people directly affected by the actions of the police.
Indeed. Credit the organizers here, because I think they've put on a fairly compelling program. You may not necessarily have been drawn into this philosophically, but if you are switching around, and I suspect this is on an awful lot of channels this afternoon, you had to be drawn in by the people who spoke, and not just the big names either. There was a young woman earlier with Black Girls Motorcycle Club, Portia Taylor, I believe was her name, who spoke movingly and compellingly about when the call to ride went out, she and her club members mounted up. They heard the call to come to the National Mall for this, and they rode in. And that's the kind of commitment, and that's the kind of passion that is both motivating and is both also, I think, the energy, if you will, that drives something like this. It was a remarkable moment, and not a big name, but an important message that you got to hear today.
And a part of that too is so many people, and Sam will bring you in because you've talked to a lot of these folks. You've been here on the mall pretty much all week as people started to file in for this, and some of the stories they had. I mean, they're coming from all over the place, Texas, and they're driving. A lot of them aren't flying.
They are, and you know what was sort of impressive to me, there were, I don't know if you see them in here, but there were a number of white people who came to this thing. A family from Indiana, they had adopted a 2-year-old black child, and they said her name was Quinn. They said, we're coming here for Quinn. And we also think that the father said moderate whites ought to pay more attention to this because they're concerned about their daughter's future. And so the whole family came, and they said there are other children. They said they think that they should be able to learn about something like this. And then there was a family from Wisconsin, a white family, who came, and they said their daughter was just interested in this. She thought it was important. And so they all hopped in the car and they drove here from Wisconsin. And so that is something as well that you had, for example, in the previous march that we talked to Johnny Wilson, who was a 14-year-old boy at the time, attended. The thing that he got was a diversity. There were a lot of people that were at that march who wanted to participate, and I guess it was a way to show that they cared. And I think you're having a situation similar to that here. That's what I noticed yesterday, talking to people on the mall who had come into town for this march. It was black and white.
Yeah, in the 1963 pictures, you go back and look at some of the, and you look at the crowd. The crowd was a nice mix. Yeah. There was a lot of folks showing solidarity for the issue, the cause. And same is true now. I mean, we looked out in the crowd as we were scanning around, you know, you see quite a bit.
So as I said, it's one of those things where people have participated in it. You know, we've done these stories on some of the activists that are, you know, the older activists now that were part of it. The people in Wisconsin, I just had to tell them the story that we did a story with John Lewis, and he had a buddy named James Zwerg, and he was from Wisconsin. And the picture that you have John Lewis standing there, and you have Jim Zwerg picking teeth out of his mouth because he had been attacked and beaten as a student along with John Lewis. And then in this thing, they're both old guys, right? And they're coming back, and they're still committed, still dedicated, still friends from that era, which is really interesting.
And still fighting, you know, after all those years for what was right. Well, you mentioned the theme of people coming from all over the country for this, and you talked with them this week. Earlier today, our Justin Hinton was out and about talking to some crowds who traveled to D.C. for this commitment march. Let's talk to Justin. Well, there's Virginia Ali. It's not Justin, but Virginia Ali from Ben's Chili Bowl. And we were telling the story earlier today about, you know, this has been just intrinsically linked to the black community, right, Sam, in D.C. This restaurant, it's just a gathering place.
Oh, yes, Virginia's my buddy.
And Virginia, well, she's just the most elegant, lovely woman. She's 87 years old, and she was in the crowd in 1963, and she, you know, obviously will never forget that I Have a Dream speech and then her actual conversations with Dr. King afterwards. And it was interesting to hear her say how they're hoping that Ben's could be a ballot location coming up for the election this year, and their involvement continues. Okay, let's try again to get our information from Justin.
This crowd just continues to grow by the hour. Social distancing, well, that's kind of gone by the wayside because there are just too many people that are here When you get a little closer to the podium, yes, folks are spaced quite a good distance apart, but when you come down closer to the reflection pool, that has just gone away. Interesting, being in the crowd, hearing these folks responding to what's being said, a lot of them are responding to the talks about voting and getting out and voting for those candidates who they feel are going to represent them. That's what they want to hear. Interesting also seemed to be in the Chicago section. There were a number of folks who had come from Chicago to be here for this march. One of those individuals is a police officer who said he's just tired of seeing what he's seeing in the news when it comes to these black individuals shot by police.
And I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've worked in some of the most hostile areas in the city of Chicago. I worked in public housing, low-income housing. So I know that these things shouldn't happen.
Yeah, in addition to him, there were a group of kids who are from Chicago as well. They were actually volunteering. They were saying that, you know, they see the violence in their city. They wanted to be able to help out here and to be a part of this march. So a lot of folks, a lot of people paying very close attention to what these speakers are saying. Reporting in Northwest, Justin Hinton, ABC 7 News.
All right, Justin, thanks for that. You saw a lot of green armbands. Our reporters have them on as well. It's because when you came to this morning's march, you had to be tested. They check your temperature to make sure that you don't have a fever, and then you were given a band and you could go in. And so they encouraged social distancing. If you didn't have a mask, they would give you a mask. So they were doing the best they can in light of a pandemic. Having a gathering like this, most would say, you know, that's probably not what you want to do. But this was one of those marches that was called by, Reverend Al Sharpton, and so they tried to put as many safety protocols in place as they could.
So we're looking live here as crowds are dispersing a bit, coming from the Lincoln Memorial, making their way to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial. It's hard to tell how many people will be here. It'll be interesting to hear the estimates, the crowd estimates when they come out. We were hearing, they were preparing for 50,000 people. Initially 100,000, but then as the pandemic situation continued on, obviously that number was cut in half, and then we'll have to see what the number ended up being.
Overall, Sam, what'd you think?
Well, again, I don't know that they planned on a march that was going to rival that march, given the pandemic and given the suggestions that people needed to basically protect themselves and to space themselves out. Right. But obviously, there's a big issue going on in this country, and this is this issue of police. And I think Sharpton made this decision, I think, right around the time he did the funeral for George Floyd. They wanted to do something, they did something, and we'll see what happens.
Exactly. Well, let's go back out live to our Justin Hinton. He is stationed for us live along the route where all the marchers are walking. Hey, Justin, how's it look out there right now?
It is very crowded here. We're along Independence Avenue. I've got a lot of cords here going on, but you take a look right here, you can see the crowd of people that are continuing to march, making their way to the MLK Memorial. Just a few feet away from us not too long ago, and really the beginning. Just talking about, a big portion of this is about voting, and a lot of people wanting equal justice for all folks, particularly saying matter. And so you've got a lot of folks that are out here supporting that cause, really wanting to see change. They don't want to see the deaths of black people at the hands of police any longer. We were just talking to a young lady walking in this march, and she had come from Indiana. She said anytime a black person is killed, it is an injustice, and she wants people to know that. That's one of the reasons why she came out here today. We were also talking earlier to a man who is a police officer. He says he's been 30 years in law enforcement, and he's a black police officer, and he said he has never been in a situation where he had to pull his gun on anyone. And he said what it comes down to for him is really communicating and connecting with your community. He goes, there are people that just know him in the community. He can go into their houses and have conversations with them. And he said that's what prevents him from being able to take it to that point. So you see these folks that are continuing to march on their way to the MLK Memorial here, a very, very long line of folks. I know one of the things that we've been talking about throughout the day and that organizers were trying to do was really focus on social distancing. You could see portions of that and the effort that was underway to try to do that, but there are just so many people out here today that it is just nearly impossible to do that. So we will continue to follow along with these folks as they march and make their way to the MLK Memorial. I'll send it back to you all.
All right, Justin, thanks very much for that. It is interesting, too, when you hear about, police officers. You talk to most police officers, say the only way to fix the problem is going to have to come from within. Good cops have to point out the bad cops and get rid of them. And you hear that from a lot of different people. It'll be interesting to see, especially because the culture in the police is that they always circle the wagons around each other, whether it's union protection, whether it's civil servant. You don't know. There's so many layers to protect bad cops. And a lot of good cops say, we wish it was a much easier process to just get them off the force. We know who they are. We've identified the problem. They're huge liabilities. And the next thing you know, they're still on the force in some capacity. So
exactly. Well, I want to bring Sam Ford back in because Sam, during our coverage throughout the week of the Commitment March, you talked to Ben Crump, and a lot of people know his name. Tell us a little bit about him and what he had to say.
Well, of course, I guess we thought we were going to see him, but he's certainly, basically, when you see one of these cases, you see Ben Crump in some way working with the families there. And of course, I guess from the time of Trayvon Martin, and you continue. And I don't know if we have this piece ready. We did a story on Ben in our interview yesterday. If we have it, I guess we could go to it. But anyway, he has obviously been out there. He has been working with the various families, and he has theories about how this thing works.
We do have it, Sam. Let's take a listen.
Jacob Blake never posed a threat to the police as he tried to get away from them. He never verbally threatened them. All he was trying to do was get in his car and drive his little boys away from a volatile situation.
Florida-based civil rights attorney Ben Crump has begun arguing the case for Jacob Blake in the court of public opinion long before any legal proceedings. As we've observed high-profile cases over recent years, he often appears representing families of black people killed or maimed at the hands of police.
What it tells us quite clearly is there are two justice systems in America, one for black America and one for white America, and we're never going to heal this country until we have equal justice for every citizen.
In our sit-down interview, he contrasted what happened to Blake with a white 17-year-old, Kyle Rittenhouse, who shot 3 protesters in Kenosha, Wisconsin, killing 2.
With an assault weapon hanging from his neck, and he walked right past law enforcement officials, the National Guard, and nobody confronted him. Nobody shot him in the back.
The Associated Press reports witnesses saying the same thing. He was later arrested at his home in Illinois.
That's all we want, is to try to have our children be able to have the American dream like everybody else.
And that was what he told us yesterday. And obviously, it's the reason a lot of these people are here today marching, hoping that something happens, something changes in this situation.
And the George Floyd moment where his brother and sister were up there, and you can see his brother was having a very difficult time getting the message out and just had to stop. I mean, that's anybody can identify with that. You're just sitting there watching this guy, and he's just trying to talk about his brother, and then had to stop. And then, the sister came up, and she was a very powerful speaker.
Yeah.
But it's just that raw emotion, and you think to yourself, for what?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's, I think, I've heard some people say that the opposite of love is fear, not necessarily hate. And I think that's what a lot of it is, the fear. Sometimes I wonder, for example, if we're criticized, many of our the video we show of people that have committed crimes are black people, and does this permeate the idea that, this is, there's so much danger, you have to act differently? It's a question. It is a question whether the police officers are in such fear that if it were someone white, they would deal with it differently because they wouldn't feel as threatened as if it is somebody who is black.
Right.
And I wonder the fact that we do this, we do the criminal news, we do these things, if that somehow permeates people and that is a result. I don't know, but it is. It's going to be a tough thing to deal with.
And we should be clear, too. We don't want to use too broad a brush here. There's 900,000 sworn officers across the country, black, white, all colors and shapes and sizes. And there's probably a vast majority of them are very good cops, and they're not fearful of anybody by the way they look or sound. It only takes a handful of bad ones, or ones that don't have enough training, or ones that are just, maybe they have some problems. And yet those are the ones that now take all the limelight away from what are potentially very good cops, day in and day out, doing their job.
Well, there's no question everything that's happened has sparked this national discussion on a new level, on a level we've never seen before.
And the discussion really ought to take place. I mean, because sometimes I guess we smile and we want things to happen in a nice way, and so we sort of ignore it and say, oh, this is going to work itself out, and it's not going to work itself out. And I think it, you know, as Dave was saying, 2020 may be the year that, you know, when you talked about civil rights, this is a situation where you're dealing with human rights on a different level.
Right.
And just bringing up 2020, our grandkids will be able to tell them this is the year. And we've been in the news business a long time, all of us, and Dave included. I don't think there's ever been another year quite like this one. Usually things happen in threes, we used to say in the news business. If something bad happens, stand by.
We're way beyond that
now. We're on now 9 or 10 or something like that.
Let's bring Dave back in, because Dave, I do think that this opportunity, this moment that we're in this country certainly has sparked these conversations. I know as a mom with 2 small children, it's natural to want to shy away from uncomfortable conversations with your family, but I think we're at a moment where these conversations have to take place.
And indeed, we're at a moment when these conversations are more likely to take place, it occurs to me, because we're all home. People are together in a way that they have not been. Ours was a society spread as far wide as you could get very often, with kids being at practice and mom and dad doing their work away from the home, that sort of thing. All of that has changed. It all comes back to this singular year, 2020. It is an opportunity to sit around and to watch things like this together, and for parents to put some perspective on events for their kids, for kids to ask questions, and for everybody to think about the big issues that, in a society that moves faster than we all care for it to, we have the opportunity now, and it's an opportunity worthy of our consideration and, frankly, taking advantage of, I think.
It is an interesting crossroads we've come to, it seems. And, you know, the march today was relatively peaceful. We haven't seen any issues, any problems. The biggest problem, though, I will say, is the heat. It has been oppressive out there. It's, you know, darn near 97, maybe 100 degrees when you factor in the humidity and being out underneath all that white stone out there, and a lot of people, no shade to be found where they were standing out there. So let's bring in our meteorologist, Alex Liggett. And, you know, there's some concern out there now, because now what do we have, a thunderstorm watch that's been issued?
Yeah, you're right, Jonathan. Severe thunderstorm watch until 8 o'clock this evening for the majority of the D.C. metro. Take you straight to the graphics right now, and it extends as far south as Charles and Prince William counties, but also extend all the way north through Pennsylvania. Very strong line of storms, even a couple of tornado warnings between, say, areas in Shippensburg and southern Pennsylvania, even just south of State College. There's a tornado warning there earlier as well. Take a look at the heat index values locally in the D.C. metro. It feels like 99 degrees. It's 92 out there right now. Dew points in the lower 70s, so it really doesn't allow people to really cool off all that much. So hopefully people are seeking shade if they can and hydrating properly. Just hopefully looking out for each other as well, because heat illness, definitely one of those issues when you're outside for a long period of time in this kind of heat. Over the next 12 hours, temperatures dipping back into the upper 80s by 6 o'clock, and I think that's when we'll have a higher threat for storms. Here is a look at radar right now. Just over the past 30 minutes, starting to see a couple of cells developing in and around the D.C. area, one just to the east of Frederick. You see that tornado warning to the northwest of Hanover. That is going to continue to move to the east, just out of our area in north of Baltimore as well. You see some of those cells now firing just around Frederick. We have a fair amount of instability in around the D.C. metro. So all of the storms that have developed to the north have that potential to just move farther south right into our area, which is why we have that severe thunderstorm watch. Now that continues until 8 o'clock tonight. You see the slight risk, that area shaded in yellow. That was added to our area earlier this afternoon because of this extra added instability and those clusters of storms upstream. The impacts, I think damaging winds will be the primary threat, but also I think we'll have a flood potential, because even after the thunderstorm watches ended at 8 o'clock, a bunch of the local models and local guidance do show a potential for storms lingering later than that. Here's a look at 5 o'clock, just a few isolated storms. This is the latest Stormwatch 7 Futurecast update. By 7 o'clock tonight, still mainly north of D.C., but some pockets of strong winds will be possible. 8:30 in and around the D.C. metro itself, 95 corridor, have that chance for some strong cells, and I think that will linger as we head later on tonight. We'll have a continued update on this, and if any watches or warnings or additional warnings are issued, I'll have that for you coming up.
Okay.
All right, Alex, thanks.
Alex, thank you very much. And as we stay on this theme of the weather, take a look at this. This was a tweet from DC Fire and EMS. Engine 23 now providing a cooling mist down at the Lincoln Memorial.
Much
it looks
needed.
like they were really appreciating that break.
I mean, Manassas 102 degrees and DC 99 degrees. Holy cow, it is hot out there. And so this is probably a big relief. All right, let's get a last, we got a few more minutes here of our coverage before we sign off for you this afternoon. Just kind of go around the horn and get everybody's impression. And Sam, I'm just curious, you know, we've talked so much, we've had town halls, we've discussed what's going on currently. We've big history buffs, the two of us, and we were looking back 1963. What's your takeaway from today?
Well, I think it's, you know, it made the point. Obviously, events made the point. I mean, the timing of this latest event in Kenosha, Wisconsin, if people were thinking maybe I'll come, maybe I won't, they probably came in this situation. The day is not over, however. I mean, for example, I guess a number of people will be going to Black Lives Matter Plaza. Yesterday, we did see a number of the landlords boarding up buildings, concerned about what's going on. So it's this part's over. Let's hope it's a peaceful day and a peaceful night.
And that's kind of what everybody was calling for today in their speeches. You didn't see anybody saying that, you know, raise up arms. They want everybody, they want change, but they want it done peacefully.
I wanted to mention also Tom Rousey, our reporter who talked to Martin Luther King III. He tweeted this. He said, when I asked King if given COVID-19, he was pleased with today's attendance. And he said, absolutely. This was never about numbers because of COVID. The crowd is large, but there's no way of knowing how big it would have been without a pandemic. And I think that's very telling. You know, the crowd was large, but as you look at these live pictures as they get to the MLK Memorial. Certainly a lot of people out in D.C. today. We just don't know the exact numbers.
In the final seconds, Dave, your last impressions from today?
The one thing is, I think we get hung up sometimes on crowd size. In fact, the National Park Service is now forbidden expressly from doing crowd estimates. But here's the thing. Right now, everybody there was walking around with one of these in their hands. They were taking pictures. They may very well have been sending things out live because there are all kinds of ways to do that now. So just because you weren't there doesn't mean that you weren't plugged in someplace all across the country. So maybe the great equalizer in the year of COVID-19 is the mobile device. It gave you that front row seat there down on the mall, and frankly, you didn't have to deal with the heat and humidity that everybody else did.
All right, Dave, thanks. And when you think about it, the phone really is why we're here. It's because that phone is documenting history in so many different ways and capturing moments that would otherwise perhaps go without notice.
So, Sam, you said they would end the march portion, at least here at the memorial, with a prayer.
That's it. They were marching over to, going over to the Martin Luther King Memorial, and at that point to have a prayer and disperse, according to the National Action Network's information.
All right, well, our crews are positioned out there. We're going to be gathering more news for you as we prepare ABC 7 News at 4 o'clock. We do appreciate you spending your day with us here.
Have a good afternoon.